My neighbor who thought I was gay my whole life found out I am in fact straight, the hard way. I, 25M, have grown up beside a middle-aged couple my whole life. They're in their 50s, and close to their daughter, 24F. We spent almost all of our time together. Her mom has always thought I was feminine, not quite right, and just what she called funny. Bet she thought I was effing hilarious last night walking in on me rearranging her daughter's guts. Let me explain. I came home to my parents' house from working out of state, and neighbor's daughter must have seen me pull in. We talked, reconnected, and decided to chill since her parents were out of town, and she was house-sitting. Drove around listening to music, smoking, dinner, and a little Netflix and chill if you know what I'm saying. One thing lead to another, and eventually her legs were over my shoulders, making it sound like mac and cheese. We didn't hear the door, but we heard the multiple, "Oh my gods." I'm diving for my clothes, her mom's freaking out, and she's covering herself with a blanket. I go running out the front door with basketball shorts on as her dad's carrying stuff to the door. I hopped into my car, and drove off like a bullet. Now I'm sitting here, in my car, in a random parking lot. I'm trying to process what just happened and how this is gonna play out. My mom texted me saying the neighbors are furious, and we all need to talk this out. My dad called trying to be stern, but knowing that we were both adults, and grew up together he just said he's surprised it didn't happen sooner.
Ex-prisoners, what was the worst thing you saw inside? I spent a couple weeks in county jail. On the first day, when we were all being processed into the facility, we were told very succinctly to never ever even joke about taking your life while in the facility. Kind of like how you just don't say bomb on an airplane anymore. By day 3, I had a good understanding of the other guys I was locked up with. I was physically the biggest of the white guys in our pod, so all the white kids huddled around my table at meals. There was one kid in the group that seemed underdeveloped mentally. He probably had a learning disability among other things, but he essentially acted like a 12-year-old. I knew early on he was going to get himself in trouble because he never stopped talking or moving, and he was rubbing everyone the wrong way. I tried to tell him to chill out and be invisible, but he was not understanding what I was telling him. I had been there a week, when the 12-year-old finally lost his cool completely. He was in the shower, singing and joking around, putting on a performance that went too far, and he pooped on the floor as a joke. After the other guys in the shower grabbed their towels and ran, he proceeded to kick the poop all over the walls and into the other shower stalls. It turned into a big scene, and then when the trustees came in to clean up the poop all over the walls it turned into an even bigger scene. The whole time, the 12-year-old was locked in a cell near the showers, laughing and joking as other inmates had to clean up his poop and make the shower area sanitary again. State-run facilities have standards after all. The next day, everyone was looking at the 12-year-old with hate in their eyes. Everyone missed their showers the day prior due to the poop incident, and then the kid was still up to his antics at breakfast the next day. Everyone got really cold toward him, even openly mean. I'll admit, I started ignoring him completely after the poop. It took him a day or two to realize he was hated by all, and then his personality changed dramatically. He became sad, despondent, and started talking to the COs because the other inmates wouldn't talk to him anymore. He messed up, and told the COs that he should just take his life and make everyone happy, and that was all it took. They dragged out the blue burrito. This is the scariest thing I had seen in jail. The blue burrito was a 10-foot-long blue foam mat. They laid it out on the floor, forced the 12-year-old to lay on the mat, and then they rolled him up with his arms at his sides into the blue burrito. The two long red belts clipped together at the top and bottom of the burrito, keeping it all nice and tight. This was the protocol at the jail. No counseling, no medical ward. You lose the ability to move. They put that poor guy in the burrito around 8 p.m., dragged him into his cell and left him laying on the floor, wrapped up tight, until breakfast the next morning, around 8 o'clock a.m. Imagine being unable to move, barely able to breathe, with no end in sight for 12 hours on the floor of your 8x8 cell. My cell was up above his, and I heard him weeping and moaning in agony all night. He didn't say a word to anyone, or look anyone in the eye for that matter for the rest of the time I was there. One night in the blue burrito broke him. What is the scariest encounter with another human you have ever experienced? I was at a sleepover and my friend and I decided to visit the forest of the school grounds. There were rumors of a great Playboy collection there, hence our visit. While there my friend stepped off to the side to have a pee. A few seconds later he comes rushing back and says run. I didn't know what his deal was, but as a kid in the forest with only the light of the moon, I figured asking questions was a secondary option to being left alone there. We ran until we couldn't run anymore. Finally my friend explained that there was some weirdo looking at him pee. He said that the guy was rubbing one out. Being kids with a history of pranks, I thought he was messing with me. Then I looked back and saw the guy a long way back but moving in our direction. We kept running towards my friend's place and he kept following. When we got back we thought we lost him. We snuck back inside and turned off all of the lights in the basement. We laid there silently and terrified. About 10 minutes later we see something move by the window. We knew someone was out there. We stayed completely still and quiet. A minute later we hear a noise coming from a room in the basement. We both lost it and started yelling for my friend's dad. He came running down the stairs and we were yelling that someone is in that room. His dad flung open the door and the window was open and there were fresh marks on the wall from someone climbing in or out. For some reason he didn't call the police. He decided to stay downstairs with us for the night. I didn't really sleep and in the morning my friend's dad made me walk home with him. A few blocks away and there were a bunch of police. As we walked by one of the cops stopped us and asked if we saw anything suspicious last night. We told him the story which kicked off further questioning. It turns out that a kid went missing from his room right around the same time that we got chased home. They found the guy a few days later and he had taken his own life. He had also abducted a boy. They never found the boy he abducted. We had a lot of trouble with that. My friend's dad felt guilty for not calling the police. He became addicted to sleeping pills. My friend was traumatized with just how close he came to being grabbed in the forest. He turned to drugs and eventually took his own life. I went through therapy for a while and still have occasional night terrors from that night even though it happened almost 30 years ago. Ruined my sister's only birth experience? I'll make sure you never forget her. Part 2. So Sarah has been a single mother for the past 6 years and has been amazing at it. At this point in my career I've been a hairdresser for about 8 months at our local Great Clips. I'm working one day and who is seated before me but Jane, Paul's wife, herself. I take her back for a trim and she clearly has no idea who I am. That adds up because a mutual friend that still keeps in contact with Paul said that Jane doesn't know a thing. She has no idea about Sarah, that she was the other woman, or that Paul actually has a kid that he's been, infrequently, paying child support for. She's in the dark on it all. I told myself not to be an ass and treat her like a normal customer, which I did. Now at this point, Jane was heavily pregnant, so a lot of our conversation was about that. She loved being pregnant but it was hard, her husband was so unsympathetic, big shocker, and she was due in 10 weeks and they still hadn't picked out a name for their baby girl. Ladies and gentle people, this was my chance. I asked what kind of name she was looking for and she said I want something unique and unusual, but not ridiculous like Brantley, you know the ones I'm talking about, and Paul had suggested so many already and she didn't like any of them. So I, conniving little weasel I am, said what about Sarah? My sister's name isn't actually Sarah, she was named after an older family member that passed not long after she was born, but there was no female equivalent for his name so our parents created one. It's a beautiful name and just what Jane was looking for. She loved it, she stuck by it, and I found out by stalking her Facebook months later that she had put her foot down about it and that was their daughter's name. Now Paul has a daughter with his ex's name to remind him every day about her, and to also remind him to pay his child support. Little nephew is 10 years old now with a new name and no contact with his biological father, though we still sometimes call him Val as a family nickname. He likes it but doesn't want to bring it to school so it's staying a family nickname. Sarah pretends to hate when we call him that, in a joking way. As long as he likes it she doesn't have a problem with it. And she's seeing a new guy who's really great and like a father to Val. My fiancé got gang face tattoos without talking to anyone. My fiancé Kim is completely insane. When I say insane I mean it. I once woke up to her giving me neck while holding a knife an inch away from my nerds. This week, she has avoided seeing most people in person. She claims she was feeling sick and just wanted to stay home alone. Leaving her home alone can sometimes be a hazard, but I obliged. Well, I came home from work a few days ago, and saw that she got a face tattoo. A really stupid one. Kim is Asian American. She got Japanese symbols going down her forehead and under her eye. She also got a tattoo of a teardrop under her other eye. Apparently the other tattoos are linked to gangs and crimes, yet Kim has no criminal record. Kim's parents are Japanese immigrants. She took 3 sick days from work to recover from the fact that she got a face tattoo. She told no one of this plan beforehand. I have never in our time together been talked to about tattoos by Kim. She showed no indication that she was even interested in getting any. I was not even the first to learn. Her sister visited her because she got worried after Kim canceled meeting with her for lunch on her 3rd day sick and got the grand reveal. She didn't tell anyone beforehand because she didn't want to be talked out of it, and hit the results because the swelling and redness were so bad that we would react badly and not be able to understand the artistic meaning. Kim talked to me last night about it, and acted offended and started a fight because I told her it was absolutely insane of her to do this. She works a public-facing job. She talks face-to-face with clients in the financial industry. The minute her boss finds out, the career that she went to school for will be over. She actually didn't consider her job, or family, or me at all and decided a long time ago, she was going to express herself freely without any concerns. I'm worried about her right now. This is not normal. She blocked my number after our fight and is ghosting me and her sister because we're trying to help. But, dear Lord, this is far beyond me. I cannot comprehend what I'm even supposed to do right now. Kim's lost her mind.
I stopped my husband from committing suicide and he thinks I never knew his plans. My husband and I are 28. We have 3 kids. He's the only boyfriend I've ever had. He's been with me since high school. He's always had low self-esteem. I do too, but not like he does. One day, we got new phones, maybe 7 years ago. I found out I can read his texts. He can see mine too, but he didn't know about it. This happened for like another 2 years. For his birthday and Christmas I'd snoop around his texts and see if Terry's something he was talking about that he wanted. One day, around November I was being nosy to see what I can get him for Christmas. I was pregnant with our 2nd child at the time. I saw he was texting someone something suspicious, saying where can we meet, and I thought this was with another girl. I read them more and I found out he was buying substances. My husband and I don't even drink, so I freaked out. I wondered about how long this was going in for, if I even knew my own husband anymore. Turns out he was buying something that doesn't get you high, but KLLSU. I looked around everywhere. I tore our room apart and didn't find anything. I went through the search history and all his emails on his phone when he was asleep that night, and found out he was making arrangements for a specific date 3 months after I was due. He was looking at life insurance, which we have had since I'm a stay-at-home mom. He was even looking up how much tea costs to be cremated. Once he got home, the first thing I did was sneak his phone and text that guy and say I'm no longer interested. If someone else tells you otherwise, it means someone else has my phone and deleted that guy's number. I didn't want him to know I was snooping, but the thought of my husband not being around tore me. I remember being sick to my stomach and bawling in our room just thinking of the idea of not having him around. I love him more than life in itself. I would die for him and not even have to think about it. My husband is my entire world. That day on, I made sure he knew that, even if it meant embarrassing myself. I started bringing him flowers at work almost every day. When he would come through the door, I would screech with excitement and give him a hug and a smooch and tell him I missed him so much and I couldn't stop thinking about him all day. When I was out with him, how beautiful and handsome he is. When he was around my friends, I'd say, look at my husband. He's so beautiful. I'd call him at work and ask how much longer until he's home. I got him to start going to therapy too. One night I woke him up because I was freaking out and couldn't sleep. I told him I had a nightmare. I said I had a dream he passed away. He said, why is that a bad thing? And I told him how he's my entire world, and other than our son, and our other on the way, he's all I live for. He said that things would be better if I was out of your hair. And I said no, they wouldn't. If you left me, it would literally ruin my life. He said, not if you're financially well off. You'll be much better off. And I said I could have all the money in the world. It would mean nothing if I didn't have you. I'd much rather be homeless but still have you as my husband than be filthy rich and you be gone. And he said, are you serious? And I said 100%. I'd sleep under a bridge if it meant I still got to sleep next to you. He said, I didn't know you felt that way, and I said I really do. I asked if I could go with him to therapy. He said yes. I told his therapist I think he has depression, and he admitted he might. He got a prescription, and it seemed to help him a whole lot. Even though it's been 5 years, I still do all those nice things for him, like call him handsome and bring him flowers. I don't ever want him to second guess for a second that he's my sunshine. Am I the a-hole for asking my coworker why he still wears his wedding ring even though his wife is deceased? Apparently, I made a mistake by talking to my new colleague, James, about his wedding ring. Some people might think I overstepped, but I don't think it was unreasonable to question him the way I did. A lot of my coworkers think I'm in the wrong for how I spoke to him, but I really don't see the issue. James is a widower who lost his wife 8 months ago, though I noticed that he still wears his wedding ring. I thought it was confusing, so I brought it up during our lunch break. I told James that he might be giving people the wrong idea by wearing his wedding ring when he's technically single now. I didn't mean to be hurtful, just practical. James seemed bothered by what I said. He explained that he hadn't really thought about it and that he didn't care what others thought. He also mentioned that even if he wasn't wearing his wedding ring and someone showed interest in him, he would still turn them down because he's not interested in a new relationship. Things got awkward, and everyone stopped eating to listen. James and I argued, and he got upset. He called me rude and said I disrespected his marriage and his late wife's memory. Then he left. I honestly felt like it was such an over-emotional and dramatic reaction for someone to give, especially for a grown man. I also feel like James acted rudely towards me. All I did was ask a simple practical question and he basically cursed me out. It was inappropriate. Again, I really don't think my question was strange to ask, and I'm sure other people might agree with me that it's weird and misleading for James to continue wearing his ring since he is no longer a married man. I'm not trying to be insensitive, I'm just a logical person, and that's how I'm viewing this situation. My coworkers said that regardless of who was right or wrong, there was no reason to bring this up and cause a scene. Now, James isn't speaking to me or the others who sided with me. Was I wrong? Did I go too far, or did James overreact? This started as a casual conversation, and I didn't use any harsh words, but it turned into an argument unexpectedly.
My horrible sister-in-law tried to kiss me, so I sued for harassment. Now she's crying and begging for my forgiveness. My sister-in-law is a very nasty person who's flirted with me a lot over the years. I've always told her to stop because it makes me very uncomfortable, so she promises to stop. Well, a few days ago at my mother-in-law's birthday party, my sister-in-law asked me to help her grab some things from the garage. As soon as we walked into the garage, she turned and pressed me up against the door with her whole body. She then started trying to kiss me. I was shocked and didn't think she would ever try to do this. I immediately pushed her off and asked her what the F she was doing. She started giggling and saying she was just doing what we both have been thinking and kept insisting, you know you want to. I told her she was out of her mind and ran out of there. I went straight to my wife and told her we were leaving. The whole ride home, she was asking me what was wrong. I wasn't sure whether to tell her because I knew how much it was going to hurt, but I also thought sister-in-law would probably try to spin it as me making a move on her, so I knew I had to just say it. I told her everything and she cried the whole way home. For the last several days, sister-in-law has been calling and texting my wife doing exactly what I thought she would do. She even told my wife that I said she was the hottest girl I've ever seen. I had to assure my wife 1,000,000 times that I did not and would never say such a thing. When I told my brother, he warned me that sister-in-law would try to interfere with my work, and while I initially dismissed it, I figured I would reach out to my boss just in case. I've been working at the same company for almost 10 years, so my boss just reassured me that she knew my real character and would let me know if sister-in-law tried anything. As predicted, sister-in-law did try to contact my boss a couple of days later. Apparently, sister-in-law said that I needed to be fired because I was a predator and claimed to have proof that I assaulted her. My boss said that was a very serious accusation to make and asked sister-in-law to explain what proof she had. Sister-in-law claimed there was a camera that caught the whole incident. My boss asked her to send the video. She got flustered and said the police had it, so my boss asked her to send over a copy of the police report. Then she said, it had a lot of private information in it, so my boss asked her to redact the private information and send it over. Sister-in-law said she didn't feel comfortable with that. My boss told her that she could not take action against an employee based on word of mouth from a stranger. Sister-in-law lashed at her about victim blaming and hung up. Unfortunately, that was not the end of it. Last Wednesday, sister-in-law somehow sent an email from my personal email account with a PP pic to the entire office. My best guess is that I must have left my email logged in on one of my in-laws' devices. She's definitely not smart enough to actually hack me. I know this is completely beside the point, but of course, she chose the weirdest looking PP I've ever seen. It's honestly kind of funny to think about sister-in-law googling gross PP or something and sifting through hundreds of images to find just the right one. I had to apologize to everyone on staff and thankfully folks were surprisingly understanding. Anyway, at this point it was clear we had to escalate things legally. I really wanted to avoid it but she forced my hand. My wife and I have a lawyer friend who helped us draft a cease and desist letter outlining her continued harassment, the material, and emotional damage this is causing us. My wife then sent a message to sister-in-law with a copy of the letter and made it very clear that we would pursue criminal or civil proceedings if her harassment continued. My wife's mom then called to her crying and begged her to just let it go and leave her alone. My wife calmly explained that sister-in-law was the only person responsible for this whole situation and that their parents had always enabled her awful behavior. She also said my sister is going to stick you two in a nursing home and steal your money the minute she has the chance, and you deserve it. My wife is firmly settled on cutting off her sister completely. Then sister-in-law sent my brother a message on Facebook to say she is going to leave us alone and to please not sue her. I told my brother not to respond, then just sat and enjoyed the idea that Mary was out there somewhere freaking out about the potential of having to actually face the consequences of her actions. It must be such a strange feeling for her. Has a teacher ever said something to your child that made you angry? My mom was the one that stormed the school. Back in the early 70s they started a program in my city called Urban/Suburban. Basically what they did was bus urban, black, kids from the city out to the suburbs, aka white. I was one of the chosen ones to get bused. I was a kindergartner. Day 1, despite admonishment by the principal to make sure all children get on the right bus, my teacher allowed me to get on the wrong bus, then the bus driver compounded the problem by forcing me off the bus in an unfamiliar neighborhood. I walked for I don't know how long, crying because I was lost. Thankfully, a bunch of teenagers came across me crying and tried to comfort me. Thankfully, the oldest boy recognized me, so took me home where his mother called my mother. My mother had been calling the school, trying to find out where I was. This was considered strike one in my mother's eyes. The school is now very much on her radar. My teacher was a racist witch and I was the only black kid in her class, and I felt her fury and disgust. The kids didn't know what to make of me either, so they stayed their distance. For the first several weeks, there was always a huge circle around me where not one child would come near me. Yet, somehow, I was always in trouble for talking. Going to get the lunches and milk for the class was always an honor. Every kid but me was chosen. I kept having a tantrum every morning because even as young as I was, I knew something wasn't right in the way my teacher treated me but I couldn't articulate the problem. Then, she made a mistake. My mother took great pride in making sure both me and my sister's hair was doing just about every morning. My mom put this hair grease on my head that had a slight odor. My teacher did not care for the odor at all so she banished me to stand outside the class because I smelled. So standing outside the classroom, I start crying because my teacher said I was smelly, something no child likes to be called. I'm totally bawling my eyes out. The vice principal comes across me crying my little heart out in the hallway and tries to find out what's wrong. I can't speak because I'm just that unhappy so I'm a bit hysterical. So he picks me up and takes me to the principal who tries to get the info out of me. I just want to go home. I just want my mommy. So the principal calls my mom. My mom arrives by taxi with my 3 years brother. She's not going to leave him with just anyone. Here's the thing, we were on welfare and with 5 kids, money was always tight but she came. As soon as I see her, I can tell she is pissed. But I don't care, I just run to her and start crying again. She manages to get what the problem is and tells the principal she wants to see the woman. Now, I guess neither the principal or the teacher have ever dealt with angry black woman but the principal had dealt with angry mother so he didn't interfere when my mother went off. She cursed that woman out so hard and fast that it left the teacher stuttering. Surprisingly enough, after that, I never had a problem with that teacher. I miss my mom.
My husband called me by his dead wife's name. And it wasn't just once, it happened twice. For a bit of a background, I've met my husband 4 years ago through the same work industry. We both instantly felt the same attraction. On our first date he told me he was widowed, that his wife had died unexpectedly at the age of 31, 2 years prior. 3 years later, we got married at the beginning of this year. Everything has been good until 2 months after we got married. I've noticed that his behavior was changing, he started to get more quiet. I've asked him if he was feeling alright. He admitted that while cleaning he came across some of his previous wife's belongings and that he accidentally tossed something from their wedding night. I felt sad for him and I couldn't imagine how he felt. I tried my best to cheer him up but his happiness was short. One night, we got into a small disagreement about some movie we were watching. During the argument, he called me by her name, which is something that he had never done. He looked frightened and shocked that he said this. He kept apologizing after it and I told him it was alright. He cried and I held him. The next morning, I've noticed he didn't sleep at all. I asked him if he wanted to talk about what happened the previous night. He got mad and told me he was gonna go visit his brother. I felt worried and told him I love him. He came home around midnight and he apologized for what happened and how he reacted. I told him everything was fine. A few weeks ago during intimacy while he was finishing, he called me by her name again. This time I was mortified, jumped off the bed and moved away from him. He tried to comfort me by giving me a hug and he kept apologizing. I told him I was going to stay in our guest room. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, he kept apologizing and told him it's fine. We talked for a bit. I asked him if he was alright and if he needed to speak to someone professionally. He agreed to go speak to someone, but he didn't show up to the appointment that we had set up for him. Our conversations since then have been insanely short. Everything has been weird since he called me her name during intimacy. He rarely speaks to me, only when he needs something. Which makes me sad because I do love him, but I'm scared that he doesn't love me. Now I recently found out that I'm pregnant. I'm happy because I've always wanted to be a mother, but I am sad I don't know if the father of my child even loves me anymore.
This jealous pick-me started flirting and touching my husband, so I embarrassed her in front of him. After the pick-me girl that had been non-stop flirting with my husband at his boxing practice, I decided that I vowed join in for a session, but I had no idea it was going to turn out to be so good for me. My patience was on the brink of exhaustion. Once, when I joined my husband at the gym and slipped into sportswear, intending to participate in their training, she began her usual antics. Having trained at this gym for numerous years, she invariably led the warm-up exercises. She intentionally made the warm-up more strenuous and intense than usual, leaving everyone winded. Panting, she rushed over to me and boasted, "This intensity is just ordinary for us. The actual training will be even more challenging. It's normal for you to find it hard initially. You'll adapt with more practice." I smiled and retorted, "I'm not exhausted. I simply believe this warm-up lacks scientific basis." She grew irritated, tugged at my husband's arm, and said, "She obviously doesn't know the first thing about boxing. Why is she acting like she's an expert?" My husband shrugged her off and intervened, "Because she is. She's a professional boxer." She looked confused, and I declared, "I'll be engaging in boxing today as well. I'll use one of your punching bags." Her surprise turned into excitement, and she suggested we engage in a real spar that day. However, I declined her proposal, expressing my disinterest. She then started to insult me, saying, "I understand now. Most girls who box merely want to appear good. They're weak and frail, scared of actual combat. There are very few girls like me, strong like a man, and unafraid of getting hit." Annoyed, I decided to spar with her just to silence her. I told her, "Fine, let's proceed." She patronizingly responded, "Don't worry, I'll be gentle with you." Observing my genuine upset and unsure how to manage her constant harassment, my husband assisted me with my boxing gloves and mouth guard, advising softly, "Don't let anger overwhelm you. Simply spar with an open heart, but remain gentle." When the fight commenced, she launched at me furiously, throwing heavy punches. So much for taking it easy on me. I dodged and occasionally evaded, questioning, "Why are you being so aggressive?" She paid no heed and continued her intense assault. It was clear that she aimed to overpower the weak. If I had been a total novice, she would have bruised me badly. Having had enough of her antics, I didn't wish to stoop down to her level or defy martial principles. When provoked, or faced with the theft of their partner, even animals will fight back. The same applies to humans. Therefore, I stopped being defensive and launched a counterattack. Although I didn't go all out, I managed to land hard enough hits to inflict pain. She was no match for me and didn't last a minute. While my personality is generally reserved, I am a boxer. Martial artists should nurture their moral character and respond to strength with equal strength. They should be open to challenging those stronger than themselves, rather than preying on the weak. Having trained for a long period, she thought she could bully others. Thus, I decided to impart a small lesson. Since she preferred acting like a tough woman in one of the boys, I treated her exactly as I would treat a guy. After I handed her a beating, she finally stopped bothering my husband and I. I hope she's learned her lesson.
What has someone told you that still bothers you to this day? Fall, 2006. I'm a senior in high school in Mississippi. I submitted all of my college applications early at the strong urging of my mom, so that by October I had already been accepted into Emory University in Atlanta. Now all I needed to do was simply coast until graduation. One week, our school counselor attempted to meet with each senior to discuss our intentions for attending college, the application process, etc. I even considered ditching my session because I had already been accepted into my first choice school and felt I wouldn't get anything out of it. The session ended up being mandatory, so I begrudgingly went into the counselor's office during my assigned time slot. I informed her of my acceptance into several out-of-state programs, and my intentions to attend Emory University in fall 2007. Without missing a beat, and almost as if she didn't even hear me, she stated that I absolutely needed to apply to in-state schools. Mind you, I'm a black man who was raised from birth in Mississippi, and I had zero intentions of extending my tenure in that state. I'm sure every reader of this story is familiar with the reputation of Mississippi for its poverty, racism, health crisis, etc. So I explained to her that I had no interest in any of the in-state colleges. Without looking up from her papers, she stated that a school like Emory might prove to be too rigorous for me, and I would probably feel more comfortable at an in-state school, especially since, quote, A lot of your friends are applying to these schools. Now, I had never personally met our counselor before this session, so she had no idea who my friends were, and neither did I since I worked a full-time job in high school and didn't really have any. She went on to explain that Emory was more for students like our valedictorian who was also going there in the fall. I had a 3.84 GPA, and considering I had already been accepted, I wasn't sure how she was coming to this conclusion. She then went on to explain that there weren't many black students at Emory, and this is a direct quote, "probably because they flunked out. I would encourage you to go to an in-state school for 2 years, and if you do well there, try to transfer to a school like Emory." I'll be honest, I thought she was joking, so I kind of laughed. Her face remained unmoving and serious. I was confused because I thought the role of a school counselor was to encourage the students, not restrict them. That conversation bothers me to this day because I think about other students like me who are being told to play it safe. Being told your kind doesn't do well in these situations, these environments, these schools, so don't fool yourself. The name of my school alone has opened doors for me that a Mississippi school couldn't. I'm thankful for my self-inflated confidence in myself to succeed in any situation, but it's crazy to think that very school counselor could very well still be counseling students to this day.
Mother-in-law abandons my child, shows up after 25 years and expects to be accepted as a grandmother. When my son was 3 days old, his mother decided she didn't want a child anymore, so I've raised him as a single father since then. She claims she's not ready to have a child and refused to even feed him or hold him. I wanted to give her some time. I thought that maybe it's just postpartum depression. I was ready to be there for her, but she was serious. She packed her stuff and left the hospital. Her last words were that she wants to see neither me or our son ever again, and she kept that promise. I got the feeling that mother-in-law had something to do with it because during her pregnancy she was talking all the time about how young her daughter is and how inappropriate of a moment this is for her to have a child. I think mother-in-law somehow secretly persuaded her to take this step. So I was left alone with an infant in my hands. It definitely wasn't easy. I was just 21 years old, I had to leave college and work very hard to give my son everything he needed. Fortunately, I wasn't completely alone. There were people who helped me to get through the hardest period, people who babysat him while I was working, who gave me advice on how to take care of a baby, and I'll be forever thankful to them. When he grew up a little, it became easier. I could send him to a kindergarten and work without asking people to take care of him while I'm not there. During all this time I hope to hear from his mother. I hope that she'll eventually come around and realize you can't just leave your child like a worthless piece of trash. But, even though I had left her my contacts and she could call me or write me a letter whenever, she didn't. I never heard from her. She never once used her rights to visit him. When he was little, he often asked me why his mother left him, why she didn't want him. And I didn't know what to answer because I always tried not to speak badly of his mother in front of him. Now my son is 25 years old, he's a hardworking, educated young man, and I'm so proud of him, and I'm proud of myself that I was able to raise him to be a good person. We stopped talking about his mother a long time ago. It was his initiative. He was like, well, if she doesn't want to be with us, then it's her loss and there's nothing we can do about it. So recently mother-in-law appeared on our doorstep. Without a call, without any kind of notification, she was just there and she had come to visit her grandson. I couldn't believe my ears, and at first, I almost didn't recognize her. And she was behaving as if she was a caring grandmother who had come to see her grandchild like she does all the time. Not like she was gone for 25 years. When my son saw her, he didn't recognize her either. I have shown him pictures of his mother and his grandmother just in case they show up one day, but I never really thought that they would. She ran up to him and hugged him just like a loving grandmother would, asking how he's doing and how big and beautiful he has become, and he pushed her away and looked kind of confused. I told him that it's his grandmother who randomly showed up to visit him, and he was like, oh, and walked away from her. Mother-in-law didn't take this reaction very well. She looked at me and was like, what have you taught him if he doesn't even say hello to his grandmother? He's looking at me as if I'm a stranger. Haven't you told him about his mother and me or shown him our pictures? Well, technically you are a stranger, mother-in-law. He had never seen you in person, so why are you so surprised? You show up out of thin air after 25 years when he's all grown up and expect him to treat you with love. Isn't it kind of delusional? My son said, Dad did show me your picture, but I needed no picture, I needed you to be there for me. He was quite hateful with her, throwing question after question at her, and mother-in-law's responses were so incredibly narrow-minded, it looked like she wasn't expecting him to ask any questions. He asked her where his mother was and mother-in-law was like, oh, she's doing very well, she's living together with a great man and she has 2 nice kids. She has gotten over that misunderstanding about your birth. She was acting as if her daughter was the victim here. As if we were the ones who left her. He asked her why did his mother abandon him. Mother-in-law said, well, she was such a young girl, it would be crazy for her to have a child at that age. She had her whole life ahead of her and a baby would only be an obstacle. You must understand it, she didn't want to lose her freedom. Honestly, her daughter was older than me when our son was born, she was 24. I don't think it's too early to have a child, it's not like she was 14 or something. Actually, age has nothing to do with it. I could have given up my son too, I was very young as well. But I didn't because I loved him and I wanted to be his father. At this point I wanted to show mother-in-law the door. Obviously, she wasn't welcome in our house, but my son stopped me. He had one more question. He asked why mother-in-law didn't want to be his grandmother. His mother left him, fine, but why did mother-in-law leave him too? Mother-in-law said, well, I had no time to take care of you. I was a young woman too, I had my life too. And grandkids are only obligated to take care of grandparents when they're old, and that's why I'm here. Then my son told her to leave and never come back. He said he doesn't want to see her ever again and he won't help her with anything. And as she was leaving, she attacked me like that's what I thought. A man alone cannot raise a proper human being. Such a rude and impolite boy, he would have turned out better in an orphanage than with you. So according to mother-in-law, the conclusion is, don't have children while you're young, or if you do, feel free to leave them and then come back a few decades later and they'll love you even though they have never received any kind of care from you. But seriously, what the hell was she expecting?
Help with confrontation. I have a friend who isn't good at being supportive. When I confide in her about anything, I never get a positive reaction from them. They're very bad at giving emotional support, and it's very difficult to open up to them. They seem to believe that they are quite easy to open to and they believe they are supportive, but to me it just doesn't feel that way. The amount of times they get angry at me is unreal, and even when I am sad about something, there is something to be angry at me for, or there's something about my issues that makes them sad, so it turns back to them. How do I tell? Do I tell this person that this is bothering me? Should I tell them face to face, or is text fine?
My stepdad is trying to act like my new dad. How do I handle it? About a year ago, my dad passed away suddenly, and my mom met a really nice guy she's been spending time with. I'm 23 years old and about to finish college. The guy has 2 daughters, 15 and 13 years old. My mom is like a mom to them now, and the guy is like a cool uncle to me. It's nice for everyone, but I'm having mixed feelings. He's not bad, but I'm still really sad about my dad. It feels like he's trying to take my dad's place sometimes. He gives me rules, like chores and when to be home, which my dad didn't do because he thought they were silly for a grown-up like me. The boyfriend thinks it's fair since I have new step-siblings. It's not fair because we're at different stages of life. He also wants me to share my stuff with his kids. They have everything they need, but he says it's important because we're all family now. I live in the basement of my mom's house, a separate part when you come in the front door. Last night, I was drunk driving my friends and got home at 2 a.m. Sure, probably a bad thing to do, but I wasn't really that messed up. I didn't have any plans until 3 p.m. today since classes start next week and my new job starts in 2 weeks. Normally, this isn't a problem with my parents. I texted my mom and went to sleep. But tonight, things went a bit crazy. The boyfriend got upset. He gave me a talk and sent me to my room, even mentioning my car privileges might be taken away. That confused me a lot because it's my car, and I bought it with my own money. I don't know if, legally, he could take away my car privileges. But that's not the point. I got really frustrated and talked to him. I told him that after I graduate, I'm moving out of the city. I'm happy about my mom's new relationship, but I'm not looking for a new dad. He needs to understand that. Our relationship won't be like father and son for a while, and he needs to treat me like an adult, or I won't want to have a relationship with him. I just want to make sure that I'm not being too much of an a-hole.
My mother used to make me eat spicy food to punish me when I was a child. Now, no one but her knows that every meal I serve her is revenge. I have never told anyone this, not even my husband, but it happened again tonight, and I'm feeling a bit giddy because of how well it has worked yet again, so I want to brag. I'm aware I'm a piece of poop, part of why I haven't told anyone. When I was little, my mother wanted to use corporal punishment on me, not my siblings, never my siblings, but because I was such a bad kid, she wanted my dad to hit me. My dad flat out refused and told her that if she did, he wouldn't be able to stay with her because he didn't want anyone hitting his kids. My dad was abused pretty severely as a kid. It's a whole other story. I can't get into it too much, or we'd be here all day. So, instead, whenever my mom was mad at me, she would give me spicy food to eat, even though I hated it and it made me sick. Like, full-on stomach cramps, diarrhea, the fucking works. She would only do it when my dad was at work, which was most nights at dinner, and whenever I asked for something else to eat, she would break down and cry over how much time she spent on my food. Don't I love her? Guilting me into hurting myself. When I turned 16, I was meant to start taking over more of the chores in the house, including cooking dinner twice a week. My mother hates pasta. She hates it. It's a texture thing, and she claims it's always slimy. One brilliant night at 16, after my father began working morning shifts, I was mad at her for screaming at me earlier in the day, and I realized I could do something about it. Since that night, pasta is one of the only meals I have cooked for my mother. I load it with sauce and sometimes make things like baked spaghetti because she hates the way the top of it looks. Whenever she tries to turn it down, I put on waterworks, shake it, and look at the table. You've always eaten it before. What did I do wrong? Are you mad at me, Mom? And because either my dad, my husband, or other people's opinions she cares about are there, she's never called me out. I am 26 years old, and I intend to do this for every meal we share, or until she cuts me off. I'm not going to be seen as the bad guy here for not keeping the family together. I honestly don't care if this makes me a bad guy. She sucked, and this is my pettiest form of revenge. Watching her try to keep a straight face while choking chicken Alfredo is the highlight of my week. This.
Am I the a-hole for lashing out at my mother-in-law? Hello, Reddit community. I'll keep this short and simple. My mother-in-law, and I haven't always had the best relationship, but after 20 years of being married to her son, we've actually grown fond of each other. She has her moments of rudeness, which I usually ignore, but I still maintain respect for her as my husband's mother and my children's grandmother. However, there's one habit of hers that bothers me. She constantly interrupts people when they're speaking. She does this to everyone, and no one ever says anything, which probably makes her think it's okay. During a recent small family gathering, she asked me about my boy's progress in school. I happily began telling her how well they were doing and was about to mention how our youngest son was receiving an award only 5 weeks into the school year. But alas, she cut me off mid-sentence and started talking about something unrelated. Despite her attempts to talk over me, I stopped her and said, "Wait. Why do you ask me a question and then interrupt me and try to change the subject? It's not relevant to our conversation." She looked shocked and started crying, accusing me of being out of line. In response, I calmly explained that she frequently interrupts people, and it's very rude. Either everyone is okay with it or they're too hesitant to speak up, but I'm tired of it. I kindly requested that unless it's urgent, she avoids interrupting people while they're speaking. The giggles and smirks from others in the room confirmed that I wasn't the only one who felt this way. They may have had similar thoughts, but I actually voiced it out. My husband supported me, agreeing that she deserved to be called out, but he did mention that he wished I had handled it more privately. I, on the other hand, had reached a breaking point after 20 years of watching her walk all over everyone, and I felt someone needed to set boundaries. So, am I the asshole for speaking up and snapping? I want to make it clear that I don't believe it's acceptable to disrespect our elders. Fellow millennials, I'm sure you'll agree. We were always taught to respect our elders. However, we were also taught to stand up for ourselves because no one will have our backs quicker than ourselves. My homophobic parents tried to disown me, thank God I own their house. I've known that I'm gay pretty much since middle school, but of course, I haven't been able to tell my parents that. We live in the middle of nowhere in Kansas, and my parents are hardcore Christian conservatives. I just graduated from high school, and a few months ago, they ended up catching me. I was with the only other gay person I know in my school when my mother walked into my room when I thought the door was locked. The next week was hellish. My mom couldn't look at me without crying, and my dad kept trying some conversion therapy bullshit that he got from our pastor. Eventually, though, they sat me down and told me that since I was an adult now, they couldn't just sit there and accept the life of sin that I had chosen for myself. As such, I had 3 days to move out of the house. I was heartbroken, until I remembered something my dad had told me when I was younger. See, my dad was all self-righteous about me sinning against God, but he was a pretty big sinner himself. He used to gamble all the time, and wouldn't pay off his credit card bills, so his credit score was absolute garbage. To get the house we're in now, he had put my name on some of the necessary documents. I went to the bank right after I remembered this to check it out, and they confirmed my suspicions. Technically, according to the paperwork my dad illegally put my name onto, I was the sole owner of our house. I proudly went back to my parents' house with paperwork in hand and told them it was actually them who would have to leave. My friends tricked me into breaking up with my boyfriend 8 years ago. I want him back now. I knew my ex-beau since we were both 11 years old. Our families were neighbors and became very close friends. We started dating in our junior year of high school. He took me to prom, to homecoming dance, and we both picked a college that was in the state that had majors we were both interested in. Everyone expected us to get married when we went off to college. The college we went to was 3 hours from our town, and it was closer to a major city in our state, and it was a bit of a culture shock for the two of us. Beau had issues at first making new friends, but I sort of jived with the gals in class. My new friends didn't think much of Beau. They kept telling me I could do better than Beau. They thought Beau was slow-witted. They thought he was too religious. They said Beau would just pull me back down to our small town, anchor me with children, and we'd both be stuck as hicks. It reached the boiling point on my 21st birthday. 2 of my girlfriends came to me claiming they saw Beau cheating on me. They were stone-faced, they kept to their stories, and I foolishly believed them. I confronted Beau and started screaming at him. Beau didn't apologize, he didn't beg and plead. Instead, he got cold and mad. He said that he never trusted my friends, that they were playing me, and he thought I was better than this. I didn't believe him and I let him walk away. He promised that if I took their word without even looking at them critically, that we were over. And he kept his word. From that day, he wouldn't even look at me. He wouldn't talk to me, he wouldn't acknowledge I existed. For the rest of college, he never dated anyone. He just worked, went to class, and graduated early. My friends, they set me up on a ton of dates. I had a bit of a wild college ride, racking up a body count in the 80s before leaving. Once I graduated, I tried to get established in life, but my college friends kept just wanting to hang out, chill, or party. It honestly got tiring, and I couldn't believe I had the energy to do this for nearly 4 years while getting an education. It was when I was 23 that one of the girls called me a stick in the mud and said something along the lines of "I can't believe we went through the effort of breaking you up with Beau if you were just going to become a wallflower." I couldn't believe it. She went into detail about how easy it was, and I felt disgusted. I didn't give Beau another thought after the breakup. I thought he was a cheater, and I told my family, who told his family, and it strained his relationship with his mom for many years. But after that point, I couldn't stop thinking about him. I told my family the truth about what happened with Beau. This apparently helped repair the relationship Beau had with his mother. Apparently, Beau's mom liked me quite a bit, and she went out of her way to sabotage Beau's relationships with any girl he brought over to meet the parents. My mom said Beau's mom did it very discreetly, but after finding out the truth, Beau's mom came clean and Beau nearly cut her out of his life. She apparently begged and pleaded, and was able to work from there. I have many unfinished drafts of emails to Beau, some saying I wish to catch up, others begging for forgiveness and pleading for him to come back to me. But any news I got on Beau after the blow-up with his mom has been sparse. Beau doesn't do social media, and I had no idea where he lived. I found out this year that Beau has been married for 3 years, and has a 2-year-old son. He has moved back to our hometown, and I saw him at the grocery store when I went to visit my parents 2 weeks ago. He didn't see me, or at least I think he didn't. But, There he was with his wife and child, and I instantly felt a swirl of emotions. Jealousy, rage, regret, depression. Even now, seeing him with his full family, I still want to beg him for a chance, which makes me feel awful, but at the same time I feel like I should at least say my piece. I talked to my mom about it, and all she said was the chickens come home to roost. Don't make trouble for Bo. I just know that if I can't talk to Bo one last time, I will regret it for the rest of my life. What do I do? When have you had to confront your mother-in-law and put your foot down, and how did you do it? When I was pregnant with my now teenager, Mill complained loud and long to anyone who would listen that ultrasounds weren't available when she was pregnant, were only done if a problem was suspected with the first 2 grandkids, and now that anyone can get them she won't find out the baby's sex and tell me. I asked her several times to stop, that it was cute and funny the first time or two but had gotten old fast. She refused to stop. The last time, she said this to a complete stranger she had just met. I just got up and walked out of the room and refused to come back in until she was gone. She tried several times over the next few days to call me, leaving fluff messages like I saw something in the store and I thought you would like it, call me back. She knew she'd pushed me too far. When I'd calmed down, with my husband's blessing, I told her that if she did that one more time she would not hear from me or see me until after the baby was born. Later, I asked her to please not smoke in the car when she had the kids with her, especially the baby because she was developing possible asthma. She promised up and down she never smoked around the kids. One day she took the baby and my oldest Christmas shopping, and when they left I reminded her about not smoking in the car. When I got home from work my son came to me, pissed off, and said Grandma started smoking before we got to the freeway and told me not to tell you. That was the last time she was allowed to be alone with my kids until she stopped smoking a few years later. People who ruined historical art pieces. What happened? I destroyed a famous art piece in a museum 10 years ago. In 2014 I was just completing my master's degree in design. Now, the way the degree was set up it was one course of 40 people, but we were all doing different areas. Dance, architecture, sculpture, textiles, everything and anything. We'd have lectures together, and present the progress on our projects every couple of months. So end of year comes around and we start setting up our final gallery show. The space we were using was the first-year art students' workshop, which we cleared out and prepped and painted fresh. When I arrived to do my part, one wall is a mess. Like 100 holes all over it, like a hammer and knife attack. I was pissed that a first year did this to a structural wall, and grabbed the sandpaper, filler and paint to fix it. The show went ahead fine with a warning wet paint sign on that section. I think you can tell where this is going. You know how your brain suddenly reminds you of things out of nowhere? Like shit, my laundry. Or arg I forgot to pay that bill. Well, I'm sat in bed today and suddenly realize. God. That was Anna's master degree piece. You see, Anna was a part-time mature student on different hours to the rest of us. We saw one presentation of her work which was about making repeated holes/cuts into paper/card. I never thought about it much again. She must have come in before the rest of us, created the wall piece for the show, and left. And I'd gone filled it and painted it away. To be fair, she never left any note or name on the piece. I don't even know if she knew what happened to it, since it's not like she would need to come back to collect it after the show since it was, you know, a wall. If she did, I hope she saw humor in it and added it to the piece's story. Humans crave to repair damage etc. Either way, I'm now silently cringing and may need to repent to the art gods lest karma strike me.
I'm helping my best friend with a natural at-home baby evacuation. My best friend has been living with us the last few weeks. She got pregnant recently by this waste of space, and wouldn't even help with a Plan B purchase. I got excited when she first told me, I am unable to have a baby of my own, and I started fantasizing about helping her take care of it. But then she told me she wanted to lose it. My heart sank, but it's her body and her life. She is not in a good place in her life right now and has been living out of her car on and off all winter. Her baby would end up being someone else's responsibility. She can't afford a child, nor can she afford an expert baby evacuation. She's still a child herself maturity-wise, so I made her some tea that my grandma used in the 70 seconds that made her lose it. It's herbs and spices that are supposed to stimulate the uterus and help miscarry. Well, it started to work. She started cramping real bad and then it stopped. Now I'm backpedaling. I'm starting to feel guilty. What if the at-home methods hurt her or the baby? I'm confused. She wants me to make her more of the tea today but more potent. If this doesn't work, I'm tapping out. I find it ironic that I want a baby more than anything in the world and I'm helping her get rid of hers. But I know I can't project my own feelings on her. I just really want her to get her life together. Here's to life and its complications.
Ruin my sister's only birth? I'll make sure you'll never forget her. When I was 14 and my oldest sister, Sarah, was 22, we found out that she was pregnant with Paul, her boyfriend of 4 years. They immediately got engaged and they were really happy. For a time, Sarah had a horrible pregnancy, about 16 to 18 weeks, and the wonder of creating a human life evaporated within her. She developed hyperemesis, which if you don't know is really bad morning sickness. She was constantly in pain, she developed gestational diabetes, and just all around hated the experience. Around this time Paul, the then fiancé, started getting sick of the complaining. I believe the argument was your body is built to do this, it can't be that bad. Sarah was due around Valentine's Day and Paul's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Doe, were very excited, both about the grandkid and the fact that he could be born on a holiday. She was very against that and really hoped that her son wouldn't be born on a holiday, even one as small as Valentine's Day. Her birthday sometimes falls on Easter and she hates it, because it might make him feel that his day isn't very much about him. Well, Mrs. Doe says something like, well, if you name him Valentine or Valentino, then that'll make the day even more special to him. Again, sister hated the idea. She thought it was tacky, he'd be bullied for it, and just really didn't like the name Valentino. Paul loved it, but agreed to go with a more average name like Daniel or Jared. Fast forward to February and she was ready to get this over with. Sarah had officially been put on bed rest because while standing or walking her blood pressure took unexpected spikes and dips. I look back now and goodness do I feel bad for her. She was doing her best to avoid giving birth on Valentine's Day because, again, she didn't want him born on a holiday. Unfortunately, births happen when they happen and that baby was going to come on Valentine's Day whether she wanted him to or not. I remember waiting out in the waiting room with my dad, brothers, and Paul, who couldn't stand to be in the delivery room because it was gross. I was so mad that he could have gone in but wouldn't because he thought my sister was gross while giving birth, whereas I had to stay outside because I was too young to go in with my mom and other sister. Dad went home with the youngest two brothers while the oldest, Zeke, stayed to watch me because I refused to leave. 16 hours after Sarah went into labor, my little nephew was officially part of the family on the evening of Valentine's Day. Unfortunately, Sarah was not okay. She had to have an emergency cesarean section and while doing the operation discovered that the back of her uterus, facing her spinal cord, had a very large and very severe, thankfully non-cancerous, tumor. When I say large I mean it was twice the size of a standard uterus. The doctors were shocked and didn't understand why nobody had noticed it on an ultrasound. It accounted for her severe back pain and blood pressure issues. The doctors immediately went in for more surgery to remove the tumor, but sadly ended up having to perform a full hysterectomy. This meant that my nephew would be Sarah's only child. Now while Sarah was in for surgery, Paul was taking care of everything baby related to make sure his son was okay. In my 14-year-old self's memory I remember him being suitably distraught, but I didn't really pay him much mind and spent my time in the waiting room with my mother and other sister. Zeke, however, wanted to be a good future brother-in-law and make sure that Paul was okay. He found Paul filling out the baby paperwork on his own, looking, in my brother's words, like he had not a single worry in his mind. Zeke asked why Paul didn't wait for Sarah to fill out the paperwork as she should have been put of surgery within the hour, and Paul said that he just wanted her to get her rest and heal. That checked out with Zeke, as he was 16 and didn't know any better at the time. Now I know what you're probably thinking. No, he wouldn't. He knows how much she hates that name. And still, she'd need to sign the paperwork too. I regret to inform you that Paul forged Sarah's signature on the paperwork and waited until she was out of surgery to hand said paperwork over. My sweet nephew, that was born on Valentine's Day, was named Valentino on his first official birth certificate. I still to this day don't know why Paul and his family were so insistent about the name. He had even picked out a different one with my sister. And before you ask, no, he was never brought up on forgery charges because his parents were witnesses to her signing the papers, even though they only got there at the last minute. So Sarah dumped him and got her son's name changed a month later. She was willing to do split custody with him because that's her son's father and she wants the kid to know him. But Paul vanished and she never heard anything back, which seemed weirdly out of character to us. Until a mutual friend on Facebook was tagged in his wedding pictures 6 months later. Paul had apparently started cheating on her not long after she got pregnant. Sarah was livid, but there wasn't much she could do, so she filed for child support and continued to live her best life. Until 6 years later. This is where the revenge starts, my friends. So Sarah has been a single mother for the past 6 years and has been amazing at it. At this point in my career I've been a hairdresser for about 8 months at our local Great Clips. I'm working one day and who is seated before me but Jane, Paul's wife, herself. I take her back for a trim and she clearly has no idea who I am. That adds up because a mutual friend that still keeps in contact with Paul said that Jane doesn't know a thing. She has no idea about Sarah, that she was the other woman, or that Paul actually has a kid that he's been, infrequently, paying child support for. She's in the dark on it all. I told myself not to be in butt and treat her like a normal customer, which I did. Now at this point, Jane was heavily pregnant, so a lot of our conversation was about that. She loved being pregnant but it was hard. Her husband was so unsympathetic, big shocker, and she was due in 10 weeks and they still hadn't picked out a name for their baby girl. Ladies and gentle peoples, this was my chance. I asked what kind of name she was looking for and she said I want something unique and unusual, but not ridiculous like Brain Lie, you know the ones I'm talking about, and Paul had suggested so many already and she didn't like any of them. So I, conniving little weasel I am, said what about Sarah? My sister's name isn't actually Sarah, she was named after an older family member that passed not long after she was born, but there was no female equivalent for his name so our parents created one. It's a beautiful name and just what Jane was looking for. She loved it, she stuck by it, and I found out by stalking her Facebook months later that she had put her foot down about it and that was their daughter's name. Now Paul has a daughter with his ex's name to remind him every day about her, and to also remind him to pay his damn child support. Little nephew is 10 years old now with a new name and no contact with his biological father, though we do still sometimes call him Val as a family nickname. He likes it but doesn't want to bring it to school so it's staying a family nickname. Sarah pretends to hate when we call him that, in a joking way. As long as he likes it she doesn't have a problem with it, and she's seeing a new guy who's really great and like a father to Val. My husband doesn't want to adopt our daughter. I had a child when I was 16 and I am not with her father and quite honestly don't know where he is. He wanted nothing to do with my daughter. When she was 6, I met my current husband. He promised me he loved her and would treat her like his own, and he seems like he has. We have more kids together. It was her 16th birthday last week and she told me that she wanted her stepdad to adopt her. I thought this was a great idea and he has always been her dad anyways. He said yes and there were a lot of happy tears, and my younger kids were happy. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. That night he told me we had to talk. He told me that he did love her, but not the same, and he felt a bit weird adopting her because he felt like it would be a disservice to her to have a dad who didn't love her like his other kids. He told me that he wanted to talk to her about it and say that she could definitely take the last name if she wanted, but that he couldn't adopt her and that he felt bad about it, but it wouldn't be fair to anyone. He said he knows we are a package deal and would always treat her well and like a part of the family, but he couldn't be her dad. He told me he was sorry and he felt guilty and that he would take care of it and I didn't have to. My heart never hurt more in that moment and I genuinely feel like I have failed my daughter. I told him I didn't want him to speak to her about it, and that if clearly doesn't think of her as his kid then it's my job as a parent to take care of her. I don't know what to do. Do I ask for a divorce? I felt sick, dizzy, and numb all week. How do I tell my daughter? I don't know what to do. And please don't tell me that step-parents don't have to love their stepkids the same because my daughter doesn't have a father and considers my husband to be her dad. He has helped raise her and disciplined her, and shared her best and worst moments with her. I have never felt so terribly about something in my life. Please help. I think I want a divorce. My daughter said she wasn't feeling well so she stayed home from school. She asked us if her dad actually wanted to adopt her or if he was pretending to because she said he's been avoiding her ever since she asked. He hugged her and kissed her and told her he loves her so much but needed to talk to her. They are on a drive right now. I pray he doesn't tell her the truth. I know a lot of people told me divorce but I'm going to try fix things first. I don't want my oldest to feel like it's all her fault, younger kids to resent her, and I am scared he wouldn't want to see her anymore. We are going to marriage counseling. I am looking for a therapist for my daughter. I let my husband talk to her because I felt like I should give them that and trusted that he wouldn't be stupid. They went on a drive. Don't know what was said exactly but they are both upset. I am going to use fake names to make it easier. My daughter stopped calling my husband dad and calls him Mike now if she even speaks/looks at him. He seems upset by it but I don't know what to tell him. Isn't it what he wanted? My girl has been very quiet and tired and I told her to stay home from school for a few days but she didn't want to. My other daughter asked us, why is Hannah calling daddy, Mike? Is he not her daddy anymore? Does that mean she isn't my sister? I corrected her and my husband looked horrified but I once again didn't know what to say to him. I've been calling her your sister instead of Hannah when I talk about her and I hope it helped. Once again, thank you. I'm exhausted as a mom and a wife but I am the glue right now and I am doing my best to make the marriage work and to be a good mom. My neighbors can't see I'm without my singing. I currently live in an apartment building in Seattle. Nearby my unit is a man named Frank and his girlfriend, who is quite vocal, thus I know her boyfriend's name. Now Frank and his girlfriend have incredibly loud intimacy throughout the entirety of Friday and Saturday nights. Annoyed by all of the sound and trying to find a way to blot it out, I began a habit a few months ago of playing music whenever they would start doing the dirty over the course of the last couple months. As an added bonus, I could hear my neighbors yell sing throughout the night, so I assumed that my playing was a helpful solution to an unfortunate circumstance borne by all of the other neighbors around me. However, tonight, I noticed something kind of strange. They were having intimacy, per usual, and I began to play music to cover up the sound. I stopped to drink some water between songs, when some of my neighbors started yelling play. For some reason, though, I didn't do anything for a few seconds, and I heard the guy, Frank's, voice call out keep playing or I'm not going to see him through the walls. I listened a while longer to see if I'd heard correctly, and they both kept moaning the same thing. It was at this point that I came to a terrible conclusion. In my attempts to cover up the sound of them having intimacy, I managed to pull some weird Pavlovian trick where whenever they had intimacy, I played guitar and sang. Thus, whenever I started to play guitar to cover up an original sound, it just added to their voyeuristic thrill and they started to depend upon it to finish. When I heard my presumed neighbors yelling for me to sing, it was actually Frank and his girlfriend. Unsure if I was right, I started playing another song and when I finished, they were going as hard as possible and moaning heavily so I figured that I'd assumed correctly. My neighbors then get understandably angry that my music playing has made this neighbor couple have intimacy, so then they begin to have really rough revenge intimacy against my wall because they think that I've caused this problem, which I have. At this point, I'm listening to Frank and his girlfriend and the couple next to my wall, one couple horny and one full of revenge, and all of this was because I tried to save myself from listening to intimacy in the first place. Today I effed up by accidentally tumble drying my cat. So I'll start by saying that I have an awesome pair of noise-canceling headphones that I wear when doing chores around the house and they work well, like really well. I'm jamming out unloading the dishwasher and remember I have some laundry to fold and more to wash. So I go to the dryer and had done a load of bedding that was dry but still in the dryer. I decide I'm going to fluff everything up and get out wrinkles before I fold everything. I close the dryer drawer and start the dryer. Now thankfully I have 2 cats and see the other one standing in the laundry room immediately looking very scared. Puffed out fur but she won't run away like she usually would when startled. She's just looking at the dryer and back at me, back to the dryer, back at me, still supremely puffed up. I think maybe the dryer is scaring her and she needs to use the litter box which is right next to the dryer. Sometimes if there's change or something left in a pocket rattling in the dryer she doesn't like it. So I turn off the dryer like okay you can use it now, but she doesn't go. She still is just standing there looking all puffy. This is when I take my headphones off and I hear something in the dryer. I open it and cat number 2 comes bolting out. He had decided at some point to take a nap on the bedding in the dryer, and I closed the poor baby in there and started the dryer. This all happened in the span of maybe 10 to 15 seconds before I turned it off and thankfully was unharmed and got lots of treats and extra snuggles, and I feel like a monster. My other cat is a hero. She got my attention and legit saved his effing life. I am so grateful to her and so happy nothing worse happened. My parents tried to give our son a DNA test. My wife is now restricting their access to him. I am 29, male, and married to a woman who is 32. She is ethnically Korean, although she grew up in the United States, and I'm a typical Northern European mutt. 4 years ago, our first son was born. My parents were incredibly excited to be grandparents and have done an admirable job of helping raise him. Since he was born, he has visually been a carbon copy of me. He has my hair color, skin color, and facial features. If you squint a bit, you can kind of sort of see a bit of my wife, but we've actually had an ongoing joke where I'll sit her down and promise her that she is in fact the mother and that I was never unfaithful. She's tired of it, but I find it hilarious at least. Anyway, 3 months ago, our second son was born. Beautiful baby. But this time, with genetics being how they are, he looks nothing like me. He looks exactly like my wife. I mean, I suppose his skin is whiter than hers, and his hair is a bit like mine. But basically the little bean is mommy. The first time I introduced him to my parents I couldn't believe their reaction. They were so excited until they saw his face, and then I saw unmistakable disappointment, followed by compensatory false enthusiasm. I immediately figured out why, but I haven't brought up the topic. Well, last Saturday, my parents were having a visit. My mother insisted on putting him to bed while my father and I were having a couple of beers. About 15 minutes after she left the room with him, I said I was going to go check on her, but my father was oddly insistent that I not. I knew something was up, so I walked into her putting the swab into a little plastic container. I knew exactly what it was. My mother was shocked when I walked in and whispered that I should in no circumstances tell my wife, who was sleeping in another room. I said okay. Then my mother made me promise, and I promised. They went home a few minutes later. When my wife woke up, the first thing I did was tell her, because there's no way I'm going to let something like that slide. She was horrified. I completely agreed with her sentiment and promised I had absolutely no doubt in my mind about the paternity of our second son. Then she said she really didn't want to let them see the baby, to which I agreed. My wife called them the next morning and told them she knew everything. Now they're furious. They insist they never even sent the sample, and they better not have, because I don't want my goddamn son's DNA in some database that will probably erroneously link him to the Zodiac killer or something. My parents and sisters think I shouldn't have told my wife, and they think I should convince her to get over it. I don't know though. I don't feel like I was in the wrong.
My husband had a relationship with a man and never told me. My husband is 31 and I'm 29. We've been together almost 4 years, married 2 years. We didn't know each other prior to 4 years ago, also known as we didn't grow up together, go to school together, or anything like that. We live in a somewhat large city. By coincidence, I now work with a woman who went to college with my husband. They were friends but didn't really keep in touch after they graduated. I worked with her for about 2 months before we realized that she used to know my husband. Now we've worked together for slightly less than a year. Last week we were talking about birthdays and Halloween plans and how as adults we rarely go out and do anything for these occasions, but when we were younger we always had multiple parties to go. We were sharing some funny party stories and she mentioned something about my husband. He was friends with all of the gay people, but had this other more conservative preppy group that he was part of, and none of them would hang out with the gay group. He's sort of just the type who is friends with everyone. She mentioned he was one of the most sexually confused men I've ever met. I sort of always knew he'd ultimately end up with a woman, but our hearts were when we found out he was dating that guy. I just laughed along like I knew exactly what she was talking about, but in reality I had absolutely no idea what she was talking about. Now yes, I know he does have several gay friends now, but so what? He never mentioned dating men before, at all. First, I want to say that I feel bad that this even bothers me. It shouldn't bother me. Who cares if he's dated men, women, non-binary people? I was sort of surprised just how much I did suddenly care. But more than anything, I was mad that he didn't tell me. Why would he not ever mention anything about it? I don't know why he'd feel the need to hide it from me. I keep wanting to bring it up to him, but it just feels awkward. Obviously he doesn't want me to know for some reason. I don't want to embarrass him or make him feel uncomfortable that my coworker shared this with me. I wonder if he's been nervous this whole time that she might reveal this, but I mean, why would this typically even come up? She and I don't even work in the same department, so we probably only talk a few times a week when working on collaborative projects.
Update. My husband had a relationship with a man and never told me. I decided to talk to my husband about what my coworker, his former college friend, mentioned to me about him being sexually confused and dating a guy in college. I really tried not to be accusatory because that's not the place I was coming from at all. I prefaced the whole conversation by telling him that he didn't have to talk about this or tell me anything if he didn't want to or wasn't ready for some reason, but that I was really caught off guard by some comments that my coworker made. The actual information she shared didn't upset me, but I was honest in that I was confused and worried about why he hadn't told me himself, and the way she said it was like everybody knew, so why hide this from me, if it did indeed happen? He just sort of sat there staring off into space for a minute and then said, "Yeah, it's true." I told him I understand that we're not obligated to tell each other every detail from our pasts, but for me personally this is something that I feel like he should have been able to share with me, and I have the impression that he was intentionally keeping it from me. He admitted he was intentionally keeping it from me, but not to deceive me. He's lost girlfriends or potential girlfriends over it before, so just got into the habit of not mentioning it, and then once he felt comfortable mentioning it to me he felt it was too far after the fact and would just be strange to bring it up at that point. Plus, he says he knows I like my men to be men, I like to be dominated, etc., and he felt that although he was pretty sure I'd be accepting, he didn't want to risk the small chance that he'd lose attraction in my eyes. I know this isn't about me, but I keep feeling it's about me. It's my fault that I left any amount of doubt in his mind that I would have accepted this, still loved him, and still been attracted to him. I feel bad, like a failure. When I asked him if it was just this one guy, more than one, is he bisexual? Now is the perfect time to tell me. He said he doesn't feel like telling me everything in graphic detail right now. He doesn't know what he considers himself, he guesses he's bisexual. He's not confused. He's attracted to men and women. He loves me. He only wants to be with me. He's not been cheating on me with men this whole time. Well, I never thought that's what was happening anyway. He dated 2 guys, years ago. He had intimacy with them. He's also done other intimate things with different guys, but not since we've been together. He said he's only telling me that because I asked and he won't lie about it, but he doesn't feel like going into detail right now, maybe later, but don't ask him about it. He apologized for not telling me. He doesn't need to be sorry. I don't think he was trying to trick me. Again, I know it was never about me really. So now I've made him feel bad. This isn't how he wanted me to find out about any of it, and he says regardless of what I say, he knows things will be awkward between us now. Maybe they will. I don't know. Definitely feels that way right now. We haven't even really been in the same room as each other since this conversation, only in passing and barely any words spoken. I feel like he doesn't want to be near me at all. I had to ask him, I just had to hear from him, but now I sort of feel like I should have just never brought it up. My girlfriend doesn't know I speak Japanese. She spoke it thinking I didn't understand. About 6 months ago I met this wonderful Japanese girl in uni. She had attended an international school in Japan and her dad had worked in the US for 20 years, so she maintained native level English and was able to study abroad here in the US very easily. Anyway, we hit it off really well and have a ton of things in common and became very close over the past few months. We often hang out at each other's places to watch anime or play video games, but so far it has been a very friendly and platonic relationship. Recently, I've begun to develop feelings for her, but I haven't really been able to muster up the courage to ask her out yet. I've been shot down several times in the past, so I've been very hesitant to go through confessions and heartbreak all over again. What I didn't tell her was that I had been learning Japanese on and off for about 6 years now. I'm very self-conscious and unconfident about my abilities, and the topic of me speaking Japanese never really came up, so I never mentioned it. I'm not exactly fluent, but I can understand a fair bit, and even though my speaking skills aren't very good, I can get around Japan perfectly fine, having spent a month there for travel. I also scan late, provide free translations online for manga on the side every once in a while to keep my language skills up, but I never really told her about it either. A few weeks ago we were watching together when she had to take a call from her mother and excused herself to the kitchen to speak with her. I decided to play around on my phone while waiting, but I couldn't help but overhear the conversation she had with her.
I gleefully told people I had cancer after they dismissed me. I have always been a filler person. My parents each had a child they obviously favored. My mother favors my younger sister, my father and my younger brother. I am the friend that is ignored in a group. I am the employee whose birthday is forgotten. I'm the person who doesn't get dates. I've gotten used to it. As a result of being this agreeable, filler, dull person, I think the people around me don't realize that I'm a natural person with needs like everyone else. The prime example was when I said my chest hurt, and I coughed constantly. The people I spoke to, and I know only a few, said it was not a big deal and that I'd be fine. I'd never complained before, so I should be fine. I took that to heart and wondered if I really should have told people I didn't feel well and if I was making it up in my head. It took me a long time to tell the doctor my symptoms because I thought I was overreacting, but I had to get checked out. Well, it turns out that there was something wrong with me. I have stage 2 NSCLC. Editor's note: lung cancer. I'm still independent and handling this alone. I drive myself to and from appointments, pick up my medication, and reason with doctors and insurance. I haven't slacked on housework or at work. In fact, I've worked even harder. Today at work, I told my friend I couldn't help her move as a favor because I had a medical appointment that day. She pressed me for more details, and I just said I had NSCLC treatment. I didn't want to give more information than that. My husband complained that I told her the info gleefully as if I was happy about the news. I told him I'm so glad to be diagnosed because it proves I have human needs like everyone else. I wasn't crazy. He said I shouldn't act like this. My husband has been unstable and touchy about random things this year, so I don't know if he has a point. Ada? Edit, same day, I'm in therapy. My therapist and I are working through things, and she's been accommodating. I feel somewhere between a filler person and an automation. Filler people aren't real, they don't have life complexities and exist solely to make others shine. Machines don't get sick. The diagnosis was concrete. I live, I'm a person, I'm not crazy and it's not in my head. I don't want attention from others. I cried and felt relief at the exact moment. I know why my husband has been unstable and touchy, thanks to the comments. At the beginning of this year, his love got into a car accident and broke her femur. She survived and is healthy now. I think that could be part of what's concerning him. My illness is a reminder that she could have died, and she could still die, and life is unpredictable that way. I alone wouldn't inspire such emotion in my husband. The comments made me realize that my husband likely felt helpless at death. I traced back to when he became touchy and moody and realized it was when she got into that car accident. My husband has asked for help. But there's nothing for him to do. I have taken care of everything and will continue to do so. I gleefully told people I had cancer after they dismissed me. The past week has been a roller coaster of emotions for me. My therapist had suggested that I write my thoughts and feelings in a journal, but I always convinced myself there wasn't enough time in a day. Writing that post made me realize I was dealing with many suppressed emotions. I resent the people who just took and took without giving back. I had told nobody besides my therapist about how much I felt like a ghost of a person and how I pushed things down and never complained. So, I spent hours writing down my thoughts in a diary. I realized I needed to be more honest and stop tiptoeing around people to make them comfortable. I told my husband that I knew about his past with his ex-girlfriend. I knew they had unresolved feelings, and he needed closure about her and their relationship. He kept checking her social media, which intensified after her car accident this year. He was shocked that I knew. I encouraged him to reach out and get the closure he wanted. We had a good conversation. He hugged me and reached out to her immediately. I think he was waiting for that push from someone. He was so happy after the conversations they had, he was glowing. She's coming to our city in a month, and they'll meet in person. He's been more affectionate and genuinely lighter, like there's a weight off his chest. I went through the motions of life. I started ignoring calls from my parents. I didn't want to help out anymore. I was too tired. My mom called and said I was being arrogant and moving away from my family before asking me to help with something. I didn't reach out to my friends. I have only a few, and we would text every day. I realized we texted because I always reached out. I told someone else about my diagnosis. My neighbor Nancy is a woman in her late 70s. She's one of the few people I feel seen by. She cares about me, and if I had told her about my health issues, she would have told me to go to the ER. I know why I didn't tell her, but I wonder why I hope for care from people who have demonstrated no respect for me instead of those who do. She was so worried for me. We had planned a fun day trip to see a flower festival next spring. I drove home on my first week of the second cycle, and for the first time, I was exhausted. I had to pull over and rest for an hour before I felt well enough to finish driving home. I was so exhausted I didn't want to move and sat in my driveway. It hit me then that I didn't have NSCLC stage 2A. I had lung cancer. I could die. I just started sobbing. All I could think of was the stupid flower festival. I haven't lived my life. I love my husband, my family, and my friends. But I don't want to marry him, I don't want to cater to my family, and I'm tired of my friends. I want to live. I want to be well enough to drive and see the flower festival with Nancy. It's only been a week and a half of change, and my emotions have gone from low to really high and back to low. I've been dreaming of my life after I beat cancer and left my husband and friends. I don't know if I can stick with it, but I am determined to be strong. My therapist says change from within can start small or big. She's proud of me and thinks I can get through this.
What is your worst public encounter with a Karen? This entitled lady tries to force me to leave a public lake, so I force her to leave instead. I used to work as a detective for a local police department, retired now, and this occurred when I was still employed there. In my life, I've always made every attempt to stay on the right side of the law, as I consider hypocrisy one of the worst traits for an officer of the law to have. I owned a nice ski boat, and in my spare time I enjoyed taking my family to the local public lake to use the boat and tube, water ski, swim etc. My kids were ages 12 and 13 at the time, and they really got a kick out of this. They wanted to go nearly every day off I had, all summer long. One day, we were at the lake, and after a few hours, my daughter mentioned she needed to use the bathroom. The lake also had a public swimming beach that had public restrooms, and we would often take bathroom breaks there. We would pull up to shore well away from the marked swimming area, and we'd disembark to use the facilities. One day, as we pulled up, I noticed a lady on a lounge chair, sunbathing on shore near where we pulled the boat up. I stayed about 50 feet from her, still about 250 feet away from the swimming area, as I slowly maneuvered the boat towards shore at idle. As I got close, she stood up and glared at me, while my kids whispered to me that they knew her as a mean lunch lady from their previous elementary school. As I brought the boat up to shore, this woman started yelling very loudly that I was breaking the law. I smiled and as friendly as I could I said, "Really? What law?" She continued yelling, saying that I was driving a motorboat in a swimming area. I pointed to the marked swimming area about 250 feet away and asked, "You mean that swimming area?" To which she replied, "Yes." I told her that I never entered or even got close to the swimming area, and that my boat was right now as close as I got. She said the law prohibits boats from pulling up to any shore. How do you get in or out of a boat? Swim? And now she was calling her son, the deputy, who was going to get me in trouble. At this point, I was starting to enjoy this a little, because I thought for sure her son the deputy would tell his mom that she couldn't stop me from pulling my boat up to shore. I stood nearby as she calls someone, assuming her son, on her cell. She then reads the person on the phone my boat hole number, it's like a license plate for boats. Then she says, with a smirk on her face, my son is going to order you from the lake, right now. And what happens next shocked me. This woman calls me by my full name. Then she hands me the phone. Now, I should say, what has just happened, is a clear, very clear, violation of the law. In my state, it's known as a line violation, and police officers/deputies are very often charged with this crime. I read about it several times a year. If an officer uses his police computer to divulge personal information, say a deputy tells his mom the name of the registered owner of a boat that she is having a disagreement with, for example, it is a crime. Every cop knows this. So as I take the phone, I immediately say, who is this? I hear, this is Deputy so-and-so of the county sheriff office and. I immediately interrupt him and say, Deputy, do you know what a line violation is? Several seconds of silence. I say, Deputy so-and-so, are you still there? He says, yes. So I again say, Deputy so-and-so, let me ask you again, do you know what a line violation is? He stammers out a reply about boat hull numbers and public records or something. I said, nope. That's not what a line violation is. Since you don't know, do I need to remind your supervisor what a line violation is? Again, silence. I then said, tell you what. I'm going to hand this phone back to your mother. Then you're going to tell your mother to leave this beach right now. Then we can all forget this ever happened. Understood? Long silence. Understood? He does a long exhale and says, yeah, okay. I hand the phone back to his mother. She whispers into the phone for a few seconds, then angrily snaps her phone shut. Without making eye contact, she packs up her stuff and is gone. I thought about reporting him anyway, but technically I was the victim, yet I wasn't feeling victimized at all, lol, so I let it go. Only one other time did I see the lady at the beach again, and as she saw me, she again immediately packed up her stuff and again left. The worst part is, her son got transferred from that precinct to mine, and he now works for me. Why would you lie about our baby? My wife is expecting our first child. I've reacted in ways I'm now questioning and need outside perspective. Background, my childhood was a tumultuous one. Growing up, I always craved a strong male figure in my life. I never had that bond with my father and always envisioned having it with a son. My wife was aware of this deep-rooted desire. During her first pregnancy appointments, I was on an essential business trip. These trips, though draining, are critical since I'm the only breadwinner, trying to ensure a different life for my child than I had. In my absence, my wife and her adopted mother attended the checkups. Upon my return, she excitedly told me we were having a boy. We invested emotionally and financially, a blue nursery, boy-themed items, even naming him after my late grandfather. However, a chance remark from her mother disclosed we're having a girl. My wife admitted she knew from the beginning but didn't tell me, thinking she was protecting my feelings. I was devastated, feeling the weight of past hurts and fresh betrayals. In my pain, I cleared out the nursery and, in a moment I regret, told her mother she wasn't welcome at upcoming family events, seeing her as part of the deceit. I acted out of deep-seated emotions and past traumas. I love my wife and regret my reactions, but I feel lost. Am I the a-hole for how I responded? My dog hurt my father while protecting my daughter. He wants me to pay his hospital bill, but in response I just sent him my vet bill. So my dad spanked me when I was a kid. I know it's an abrupt start to the story, but it's true. He always stood by it too, and would say how he couldn't believe how soft we were getting. I spanked my kids and they turned out alright is a sentence I've heard about 100 times. Which is so weird to say in front of the person you hit honestly. Like, yeah dad, you just spanked me, you didn't beat the SHT out of me, but you definitely ruined all trust I had in authority figures and made me live in fear in my own home. So, not great, but I guess we all did turn out fine, and he's just a weird old man, so people tend to ignore him. All I know is that I am never going to hit my daughter the way my dad hit me. Julia is 9 years old and she's the light of my life. I took her up to my mom and dad's place this week because they just put in a pool and it has been the perfect weather for sitting by the water. It was pretty perfect actually, the whole family together and the dogs playing on the lawn. Julia was in the garden pretending to be a farmer. She was plucking flowers from the bush and Grandpa yells, Julia, don't pull the roses off my bush. But I was in the middle of a conversation, so I didn't think about it. Then I hear my wife shout and I look up and my dad had grabbed my daughter roughly by the arm. I had never seen her that scared before and I started to race over there. I wanted to rip him off of her. How dare he touch my daughter like that? He was winding up to hit her and I was just on the other side of the yard, but it felt like miles because I knew I was not going to get there in time. Like a bolt of lightning though, my dog Spike got there first and bit down on my dad's arm, making him let go of my daughter. My dog is a cane corso. For those who don't know what that is, it's a huge breed of dog, and though our dog generally isn't aggressive, this breed are often used as attack dogs. He's a big softie, but I trained him for protection, so it's no surprise that this was what he did. After all, my dad was genuinely about to hit my kid. Spike held on though. My dad was screaming, Julia was crying, the dog was growling, my mom was trying to get the dog off my dad. Blood everywhere. It was complete chaos. Eventually my dad grabbed a garden statue and clocked my dog over the head with it and he let go, whimpering. My dad's arm was totally cut open and he was bleeding everywhere. It was a pretty quick trip to the emergency room, but I wouldn't know because I didn't go with him. I didn't even offer. I went with my wife and daughter to take Spike to the vet immediately. We were scared he would die. My daughter was really shaken up but just kept petting Spike in the back seat saying, you saved me Spikey. You saved me. He almost didn't make it, but he pulled through. He has a huge scar on his eye and probably won't be doing well for a while, but we have our protector safe and sound. I got a text from my dad. He said he had to get 27 stitches because of what my dog did to me. He said I ought to call the police for what your animal did to me. He needs to be put down. Here's my medical bill, you can start with that, and then sent me a picture of his hospital bill from the stitches today. I could have unloaded so much trauma and rage from my whole life into that man. Maybe I should have. But instead I sent back a picture of the vet bill I got and responded simply, "You're lucky Spike lived. He better get used to spending more time alone because we are never going to see him again." How can you politely tell someone you no longer want to be roommates after living together for a year? At the age of 23, I moved out of my parents' home and I moved into an apartment with my brother's girlfriend at the time. After living together for close to a year, we had to decide if we wanted to renew our lease or not. We both agreed that we wanted to move out of this particular apartment. We looked around at a few other places and I let her know that I wasn't sure if I wanted to have a roommate, her, or move out on my own at this point in time. This wasn't a plan that I came up with, as it was true that I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. By planting the seed and letting her know that I might want to live on my own, I think it worked out very well. When we lived together, we didn't have issues and we got along well. When I first moved out of my parents' home, I was apprehensive to live completely on my own, so having a roommate was a great stepping stone for me. After that year of living together, I felt confident that I could live alone and handle everything without having to rely on a roommate. Shortly after our conversation and looking at a few other potential apartments, I let my friend know that I thought it was time for me to live alone. She took it well and was not upset with me at all. I think the best way to tell a roommate that you want to live alone is to just be honest, straightforward, and direct. Everyone has to make the ultimate choice that is best for them. He cost me my wife, so I ruined his lover over and over again. Either 10, 20, or 30 years ago, I married my high school sweetheart, Betty. I had just graduated high school, and she was staying in high school, pregnant with our first child Frankie at age 18 to 19. Throughout her pregnancy and our dating, I was informed of Betty's condition of epilepsy. She had infrequent seizures, and I have seen her have a grand mal seizure twice before the incident, once while eating, and once on a family hike. The light flickering through the trees triggered it, we think. So later down the road we have our second child, living on our own in a trailer park in Bloxnard. My wife has always been a little bit punk, dyeing her hair many times over and over, and now having to shave her head as a result of her extremely damaged hair. She dyed what was left of her hair pink. She was a belly dancer, had a style of her own, and really had a don't F with me vibe she gave off to anybody but me and our two boys, Frankie and Sam. These aren't just nostalgic details, they are important to the slowly increasing plot. That being said, one afternoon while Betty is getting ready to drop the boys off at Grandma's to hit the mall, she had another seizure, a bad one. It's hard to be too descriptive without choking up right now, but she knew it was coming the second before. She hits the ground, I do my part to put her on her side and sweep the mouth. I know this is frowned upon now for some reason, but it's what her parents trained me to do. I call an ambulance, telling them help, my wife is having a grand mal seizure, a bad one. Whilst trying to instruct my frightened 3-year-old to go to mommy's bedroom, Sammy was hardcore napping at 11 months, literally inches away. The ambulance shows up and takes her. I stay back because Grandma isn't there yet for the kids. I called to make sure she'd be there soon, otherwise I'd have to drag the kids with me to the local hospital. Grandma gets there and I drive to the hospital as fast as possible. I get there pretty quick and talk to the doctor within a few minutes. The ER physician, we'll call Dr. Thoreau, steeped in irony, whose mercy I was at, told me that we're going to put her under to do a CAT scan / MRI / something having nothing to do with her epilepsy. In my naivete, not understanding that I can tell him what I want him to do, I just said okay. I did tell him, however, that she had a seizure, has had seizures in the past, etc. He didn't believe that the seizure was epileptic in nature. He asked me about substances she's taken, drinks, etc. I told him no, she doesn't do that, but she did have a drink a couple of nights ago. He was super convinced, based on her appearance I presume, that this was substances, and that she just needed to get it out of her system. Toxicology comes back. No substances in system. Dr. Thoreau says this doesn't test for all substances out there. Wow, doc. So she's put under now, kept in that state, in the meanwhile no EEG machine, which measures brainwaves, to determine that, yeah, she's having a seizure. SS, give her some phenobarb or whatever. I didn't know the importance of all this at the time, so we're just waiting for this test and that test and for her to come out of the under ness or whatever. This takes a day and a half. They finally allow / acquire an EEG machine, with an EEG tech, and come to find out I was right, that all along, she was having seizures. The entire time. Now she is brain dead. Now I'm signing DNRs and hospice and neurologists are asking me about Buddhism and if I've tried it. Nice try. So she died days later. Then something called 9/11 happened, which not only was 5 days after what would have been my wife's 23rd birthday, but exactly my 25th. Let's just say it was a rough year. My father-in-law tries to go to one of those law tigers with the case, but they say it needs to come from the husband. At first I don't want to go through this process, despite knowing that. This mofo's arrogance caused my wife's demise. I eventually lawyer up, get referred to a great attorney on contingency, and begin the lawsuit process. Revenge is starting. EEG techs, hospitals, various entities involved in Betty's care, all separately settled out of court for unspecified amounts, well specified to me obviously. This is just the beginning of the revenge. Of all the entities that bowed out of the fight and handed over a check, this arrogant doc wasn't having it. He wanted a trial. He really wanted me to have to relive the pain I'd been going through the past couple years, just protect his / her name. We take it to court. Revenge by jury. 7-2 in favor of the plaintiff. Dr. Thoreau fell below the standard of care. Judgment for $10 million. Goodbye money. Civil suit done. Enter fallout in the medical community. Ultimate revenge is that the doctor had his license suspended for a time, and didn't practice medicine for a long time. Then he tried his / her hand at different types of professions. Unemployable in the medical field. To this day. Dude's broker than I ever was.
What are the craziest fan posts? Viewer submitted story. I'm in a relationship with a man 21 years older than me and I'm scared I'm going to be stuck with him. I, F21, met my boyfriend, M42, when I was 18 going on 19. We met on a chatting website and hit it off pretty quickly. I thought he was really sweet compared to all the other pervs I was talking to. I thought he was too old to be anything other than my friend. It still happened somehow. He asked me out after a week or two of dating and I said yes, not thinking it would last any longer than a week because I didn't want to date a 41-year-old man. Well, long story short, we've been dating for 2 years now. It's been a roller coaster of unnecessary drama, lying, cheating, abuse, physical, mental, verbal, sexual, and I hate to admit this but I never intended for this to happen. I don't know what happened. I tried to break up with him several times but he wouldn't budge. I tried lying, cheating, being mean, and nothing. He won't let me leave. I even took it to another level by moving in with him again. The first time I moved in with him, I found out he was still in contact with his ex, joint bank account and stole his car, so I had to endure the mental manipulation and sexual abuse because he didn't have the balls to tell her he was dating someone. That ended up in her showing up and destroying the little belongings I had and riding off in a cop car. In the end, I had to leave. I was heartbroken and sad. I lost 40 pounds in 4 months. But I came back again. He didn't do anything to try and make me feel better or anything. He just continued to text me and wanted to video chat like nothing happened. The second time I came back, he began to physically abuse me because I was talking to other men. I know I shouldn't have but I just wanted him to dump me. He started smacking me around and knocked my head around so bad, I had headaches every day for weeks. I still didn't leave though. He just started buying me gifts and a promise ring and I didn't say anything. I don't have anyone to talk to. They have to be approved by him and he has to know everything about them. I don't have any family to contact to help me. My entire family disowned me. I don't even have a driver's license or high school diploma. He talked me out of finishing school because he said he'd take care of me. Spoiler alert, he's not. I can't believe I was so dumb enough to fall for this. And now he wants to have a baby. Luckily, I haven't fallen pregnant yet but I'm scared that it'll happen. He says we're ready. I'm not. The last thing I want is a child with him. I'm not looking for sympathy or advice. I just need somewhere to scream. I'm in this house all alone with him and it's so exhausting. He wants to get married next year too. I don't think I'm going to be able to leave him anytime. I don't know what to do. I don't know what it is about me that he can't let go. He is my first everything. He knows this. He doesn't want anyone else to even look at me, which I thought was pretty sweet in the beginning but now I know is pretty toxic and controlling. When we play mobile games together, RPG, roleplay, etc., he gets mad when people friend request me. It's ridiculous. He's turned me into a plus-sized woman because that's what he likes. I used to be 190 pounds. That may be huge to some people but I was happy. I was happy and healthy. I'm now 245 pounds. I'm in a size 3X/4X and my bust has gone up 5 sizes. He always says how beautiful and sexy I am but I'm so unhappy. I want to lose this weight and eat healthier like I used to but he says he can't afford fresh fruits and veggies. He turns off my alarms to work out. He even goes as far as arguing with me to make me come back to bed. He says I'm beautiful and perfect to him but I hate looking at myself. I hate not having any clothes or shoes in my size, I hate getting in bed with him, I hate what I am. He's not someone I've ever been attracted to either. And when I say that, he just shrugs it off and tries to hug me and kiss me more. I do not love him anymore and he refuses to accept this. I want out. He's low-key holding me hostage and I'm losing my strength to fight every day. I don't want him to win but I'm tired. So tired.
Am I the a-hole for not having my cancer-stricken ex-husband stay with me through his treatment? For most of our marriage my husband and I had a very happy relationship. We had good jobs, decent money, 2 kids and loved each other. Then he got diagnosed with a rare form of cancer and we went through years of painful treatments and recovery together. We moved to a small house to be close to the research center where he underwent treatment. His parents paid half of the down payment on the house, the other half was from our savings and investments. In the divorce he gave me the house and took all of his medical debt. We have been divorced a year, but now his cancer has come back and he needs treatment again at the same research hospital. He wants to stay in what is now my house while undergoing treatment and his parents expect me to house him and look after him because he was generous in letting me have the house without taking his rightful share from the equity. When we were married and he was undergoing treatment, it was new stuff that was expensive and also very physically draining on him. We were lucky that both our jobs were supportive and flexible, but with his health issues, little kids and expenses, we had to downgrade our lifestyle a lot. That plus the physical changes in his body made him very depressed. Whenever he felt a bit better, he'd go stay in his hometown. It's a small town where most of his family and a lot of his childhood friends live. I was doing all the caretaking of him, while also dealing with insurance complications. I was also managing the kids, the entire household and my full-time job. We had help from friends and neighbors but it was very hard. I wasn't happy about him spending his healthy days away from us, but it was good for his mental health, so I didn't feel like I could object. While he was staying there, he had reconnected with his high school girlfriend. A couple years ago, he admitted to me that he was sleeping with her and I filed for divorce. He had fully recovered from his cancer by then. There are other aspects around the cheating that left me very heartbroken and feeling betrayed. His giving me the house and taking all the debt was an apology of a sort. His parents feel that I owe him for getting the house and should let him stay there for the 2 to 3 months his treatment is at the facility. I do want him to be well and I don't want my kids to lose a loving father. But I can't deal with having him around me, especially not if I end up being his nurse and caretaker again. I am still very bitter about how our marriage ended. A lot of people close to me are telling me that I should support him for the sake of my kids. What was your Saul Goodman moment? There is a lot of history to this story which I won't go into here, but the short version is that for 5 years after we split, myself and the father of my children had been amicable. There had never been any issues with him seeing the children and he had always paid child maintenance on time with no reminders necessary. I would be inclined to say it wasn't just amicable, we had managed to remain friends for the sake of the children. That was until last summer, July 2019, when he met someone new. She took an immediate dislike to me because she couldn't understand our friendship and despite having 3 children of her own, appeared to take an immediate dislike to my children. 7 months later my son doesn't see his father anymore and my daughter often asks to stay home with us rather than see him fortnightly like she used to. Well, girlfriend decided their dad was paying too much maintenance. After arguments we agreed he could reduce it from the £280 a month he was giving us to £50 a week. It then became a nightmare. I was having to remind him every week that he hadn't paid it yet and he became more and more demanding, expecting me to drop my daughter off at the weekend and or pick her up. This was fine for the first 3 months until Christmas when he told me she had advised him to apply through the child maintenance service because he would then only have to give me £40 a week. I told him I had worked it all out to be around £70 a week using their online calculator and said I was happy with £50 a week. They insisted regardless, angrily telling me I was lying. On Saturday the child maintenance service got in touch. From this week he has to give us £72.26 a week, and to make it even more satisfying, because he has gone through them, it is now legally binding, so he has no choice but to pay it in full on time or they will automatically take it straight from his bank account and he will be charged a 20% fee on top every week. It now works out at £313 per month, so he is paying more than he was before he even met her. Rather than seeing me as the enemy and ruining his relationship with our children, they should have listened to me in the first place. My horrible sister-in-law told me that she's worried that her niece would end up crazy like my wife. So I shut her up and said that she couldn't comment until she got pregnant. I don't like my sister-in-law, Amy. She's a very judgmental girl who doesn't know when to read the room and gives unsolicited advice. I'm civil since she makes my brother, Frank, happy, but that's as much respect I have for her. Anyway, she has a problem with my wife, Natasha specifically. My wife keeps to herself a lot of the time and has always been introverted. She's been through a lot in her childhood and has borderline personality disorder. This is one of the things that Amy always comments on, but I always shut it down. When we found out we were pregnant with our first baby, Amy made comments about how she was worried her future niece or nephew would get my wife's BPD and end up crazy. She walked out of there with a black eye from my wife. I lowered contact with Amy and told Frank to lay off for a while, which caused a rift between the family, with them taking Amy and Frank's side since they've never really liked my Natasha. I didn't care. I focused on my wife and our children. Both pregnancies were okay. I and Frank eventually made up and I agreed that he could meet my eldest. Come around the 3rd pregnancy and this was the worst I've seen Natasha. She couldn't walk, could barely breathe, and was in constant pain. I've never felt more useless knowing I couldn't take away her pain. We had a daily hospital check which never really got anywhere except new medications. It got really bad at one point that I broke down crying and begged her to terminate since I didn't want to lose her and the kids to lose their mom. She refused and we pushed through and had our last baby girl a couple of weeks ago. She of course is postpartum. It's not horrible, but mixed with her mental illness she's been really quiet and looks uninterested in the baby, but she does care, just tired. I'm doing my best to support her and all 3 of our babies. But the issue came up last week. We finally allowed visitations with the boundary that Natasha wanted only her and me to hold the baby, which everyone followed. During the visit Natasha went upstairs to feed our girls. That's when Amy turned to my mom and complained about Natasha not allowing anyone to bond with the baby and began dramatically with the whole rule. My mom agreed and told me to talk to her so she could bond with her grandbaby. I shut them both down saying she was the mother and it was her final choice. Amy scoffed and said if she was a mom she wouldn't act this dramatically. I got pissed because this girl didn't know half of what my wife went through and had the nerve to call her dramatic. I told her that she can't comment on how my wife handles her pregnancies until she gets pregnant. Amy bawled her eyes out screaming at me and ran out with my brother following her, also calling me an ass. My parents left and I told them not to come back until they apologized. I don't think I'm wrong, but they've since cut contact with me again. I did not tell my wife what happened, but she doesn't seem to mind that they are not visiting anymore.
I reported my doctor for telling my awful family I'm on Vyvanse. They were livid and wants me to stop my meds because they don't believe in ADHD. My sister's lifelong best friend has been my doctor for a couple of years. Initially, my doctor was a colleague of hers from the same clinic. After my doctor was away on maternity leave, I temporarily switched to my sister's friend as my primary physician. It's been that way since the pandemic began and I never switched back. I have been seeing a doctor because I have ADHD and getting prescription meds for it. I have been on meds for a few years now. It was something I haven't shared with any of my family members for fear of backlash, since I come from a long line of type A overachievers who don't believe in ADHD and write it off as laziness. But this is where the issue takes place. A few days ago, My siblings and I were hanging out at our house watching the Matthew Perry and Diane Sawyer episode where he shares his history with substance abuse, and I made a comment about how skinny he looked during one of the seasons of Friends. My sister then, out of nowhere, says to me, "Well, it started with prescription drugs, so I hope you don't get hooked." I was instantly gripped with a feeling of absolute horror. My other siblings were confused and looking at her for further clarification, but she didn't say anything more. I spent the whole night just frozen and with a deep pit in my stomach. Later, when I found some time alone with her, I had to pry the information out of her. She had just gotten back from a girls' ski trip, and when they were extremely drunk, her friend, my doctor, slipped up and mentioned that she'd seen me recently for an increase in my dosage. She revealed to my sister that I had been taking prescription Vyvanse for a few years now. I'm so livid, feel utter betrayal, and have a strong urge to report her for breaking HIPAA regulations. My sister won't stop texting and calling me about it, literally all day long, begging me not to ruin her friend's life forever after years of hard work. She's obviously worried about losing her friend, but she couldn't care less about how disrespected I feel and how my privacy was violated. And more than anything, I worry that my sister will share it with my parents and my family will never look at me or my achievements the same. My sister tried to guilt-trip me and said that she apparently brings in the bigger chunk of the income in their family. My sister keeps reminding me that I'm also ruining 2 innocent children's lives in the process, which is the only thing I feel guilty about. I adore those kids and they don't deserve that. But I also cannot get over how betrayed I feel. I always keep a safe distance between personal and professional relationships and would have never picked her to be my doctor had the circumstances not unfolded the way they did. She was the next best doctor and was the obvious choice because I wasn't really looking to switch to a new clinic during the pandemic. But I made my decision and I reached out to a close lawyer friend for advice as well. He agreed that I should report it and to do it without informing anyone else. He said it was better for me to do it sooner to have it on record. They prefer any complaint to be filed within 180 days of when you knew that the act or omission complained of occurred. 2 days after that, I reported her to OCR for violating HIPAA and the Patient Safety Act by breaching my fundamental right to health information privacy. I didn't tell my sister or anyone else, but a few days later, I saw my entire family when I went home for the holidays. I hadn't heard anything back yet on my complaint, so I wasn't sure if she was aware yet. Turns out that wasn't my biggest issue at that moment, though. My sister had already told my parents that I was on an extremely high dose of controlled substances. I knew my parents wouldn't take this news well, but they were far more upset about it than I could have imagined. My dad doesn't believe in ADHD and thinks it's merely an excuse for those who allow themselves to get easily distracted, especially since the age of social media. He even remarked that he noticed I was quite slow with my responses since dropping out of my chess club. Absurd and offensive comments. I can't even remember a lot of it because I was frozen. I just sat there, nauseous and livid, with tears in my eyes, listening to the 3 of them, my parents and sister, take turns going off at me. My mom wanted me to stop all medications immediately, that I'm better than this and smarter than this. She even threatened to tell your professors that you're on drugs if you leave us with no choice. But when she said that, it hit me. I had a choice. I could choose. I could choose to never have to deal with this again and not let them treat me this way anymore. So I did. I chose to say nothing. I allowed them to interpret my silence as agreeing and submitting to their ways, as I have done so many times before. Then I went to my room, chose to book a flight, and packed up most of my stuff. My books would need buses of their own to be transported anywhere. The next morning, I chose to call an Uber a few hours before my flight, while they were still asleep, and flew back to my university. I chose me. In January, I found out that my doctor had prior complaints from patients against her, and my report had opened an investigation that is currently ongoing. She's been placed on temporary leave until the case is resolved.
People who were mentioned in someone's unalivement note. What's your story? A good friend of mine unalived herself after her son died. She had always wanted nothing more in the world than to be a mother, and when her son was born we were all very happy for her. 2 years later, he was diagnosed with a rare genetic illness that was some kind of muscular dystrophy. It was a very slow, very painful process, and there was nothing she could do, only watch as her son slowly lost his just newfound ability to crawl, talk and eat. After a year he was connected to all kinds of hoses keeping him alive. She had to feed him through a tube, his breathing through an oxygen hose was weak, and he looked miserable. After 2 more years at the age of 4 he died. We attended his funeral, we talked to her, and through all this she seemed so strong. She never let anyone see her weakness. But on the funeral day, she broke down and cried and told us the turmoil she had been going through. She knew there was nothing she could have done to prevent this, that she wanted to be strong for her son even though he couldn't open his eyes for the last months, and how she sometimes wished for it to be over sooner, so he wouldn't suffer so long. One of her other friends said that it will get better, slowly but eventually, because she didn't know what to say. None of us knew, except those set phrases. A week later she had killed herself, but not before writing a personal note to each and every one of her friends and her family, explaining how she could never get over the death of her child and that we shouldn't be sad because she didn't end her life because she was sorrowful, but hopeful to see him again. We try to meet every year on her death day in a pub we used to drink, It's been 6 years since then.
My son is a psychopath, and I'm scared to tell him. I don't know if it's sociopath or psychopath, but I know something is wrong with my son and I need anyone to help me with this, as I'm on the edge of losing my mind and need to get this off my chest, as this is driving me insane. A little backstory. I have 2 children, 1 boy and 1 girl. Unfortunately, their father left me for another woman and I have cared for them ever since. My son's name is David and he is 13 years old and doesn't interact with anybody unless it's his sisters or me. And even then it's not a complete sentence. He always uses his hands when he wants something the majority of the time. At first I thought he was deaf. Still, he only fully communicates with his imaginary friend named Friday. Ever since the age of 6, David has always had this one particular imaginary friend. Initially I thought it was cute, but things only got weird as the years passed. Whenever my son gets frustrated, he hits himself on the head repeatedly and yells HH. I always get scared when he does this, and when things get worse, David starts breaking stuff around him. One time his sister teased him by saying that his friend Friday wasn't real. I kid you not. I walked through the hallway and I saw David with his hand on his sister's neck. I successfully broke them apart and she was so scared. Shaking in fear, I asked why on earth he would do that, and once again he got frustrated and started hitting himself. My daughter was so scared of him that she wanted to stay at her father's place, as she did not want to be in the same house. After I sent her to stay with her father for a while, things only worsened. David started banging his head on the walls, biting his nails till there was nothing left, purposely hurt his sister's pet fish while she was away by putting it in the microwave, and many more. But not as bad as these 3. Things only get worse when he is at school. He got suspended and almost expelled for putting hand sanitizer inside a kid's milk carton. Thank goodness one of his classmates caught him and told the teacher before something terrible happened. David also hits people randomly, pulls his classmates' hair, steals, throws food in the cafeteria, pulls the fire alarm, writes on walls, and so much more. He also had drawn many creepy pictures, each with the same person. It was Friday, his imaginary friend that his art teacher told me about when came to the parent-teacher conference. I'm losing my mind here. It is causing me so much stress dealing with him, not to mention all the school property damage I had to pay, placed me in a dark place I didn't want to go to. But I did not give up on my son because I love him. I eventually pulled David out of school, thinking maybe he just wanted to be around people he liked. I put him in many programs to fix his behavior, but nothing works. The doctor describes him with prescription pills to calm him down at least, but I feel like he's not actually taking them, but instead tricking me into believing he is, as I stand there and watch him take it, because I will be honest, I don't trust him. For a while, things got a bit better when his sister came back, but 2 days later, after her return, I was entirely wrong. His behavior has gotten so strange and somewhat beyond creepy. I woke up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. I turned my lamp on and instantly saw my son staring at me in the darkness, standing in the middle of the hallway. I don't know how long he had been there, but he scared me. The boy ain't right. All David does is draw pictures of this Friday character, talk to him like he's there, and stand in the corner all day. I don't know what to do anymore. He only wanted a sheep mask for Christmas this year, which was his favorite animal. I thought it was weird, but I told him Santa would get it for him. David practically wears it most of the time, which his sister and I find weird, but I don't judge as long as he is happy. His father came for Christmas, and even he is scared of him. I told his father and sister not to eat around him and pay close attention to their food, as David likes to put poison inside people's meals, as he did with his classmate. I found this strange habit of his out when I saw him put cooking oil underneath the cabinet inside his sister's cereal bowl one morning. I feel like if this keeps going, David will only get worse. Please, I'm begging anyone to give me advice on this situation. This is not fake, and I desperately need help with this. I talked to my friends, co-workers and family about this, and they have no clue how to solve this without me sending David away for good. I love my son, but his abnormal behavior drains me. I had never felt this tired and stressed. It was terrible before, but this is getting worse as the days and his age goes by. Here is one picture in particular he drew that scared me. It wasn't Friday. He already scares me enough, but the words around are what made me afraid. I found a secret Nazi bunker and you won't believe what happened. One day, I went with my dog into a German forest but then noticed something I had never seen before in all these years. It was a pipe coming out of the ground. That didn't make much sense because the forest was far away from civilization. Well, I explored the pipe and the surroundings, and guess what? I found what I needed, a very small metal door in a hill that led to a bunker. The door was completely closed, and there was no way in, so I searched a bit more around the pipe. And there it was, a very small hatch on the ground, cleverly covered with fake plastic leaves. I tied my dog to a tree and tried opening the hatch, and with a bit of strength, it finally opened. There was a ladder leading into the absolute darkness. Everything was quite down there. For a moment, I thought about going back up because I had a bad feeling, but curiosity convinced me to go further. It was very weird to be there, and I couldn't see much because I used the light from my smartphone. I found some doors that said labor, which means laboratory in English. Also, I found 2 locked doors with Gafar written on them, which means danger. On one of the doors, there was even a sign saying please don't remove the files. It was very strange, but then I accidentally touched a button with my hand, and suddenly, everything went very loud. All the machines made noise, and the lights flickered on and off. To be honest, I thought it was cool, and at that moment, I even saw stairs leading down to another floor, but then I heard other weird sounds, footsteps running towards me. I wouldn't say it was an animal because you could hear shoes walking on the metal ground. I panicked and tried to escape as fast as I could. I ran to the hatch and climbed it. Surprisingly, the steps completely stopped as soon as I was out of the bunker. I released my dog from the tree and wanted to close the hatch again. But, the moment I touched the hatch, I heard someone climbing the ladder, but not at a humanly possible speed. No human could climb that fast. I closed the door and ran as quickly as I could with my dog back home because it was already night. A week later, I couldn't help but go back to that forest. The whole bunker thing was just too weird, and I needed to figure out what was going on. So, I took my dog and we went back to where the bunker had been. And guess what? The hatch was back. It was like it had never disappeared. My dog started growling, staring at the hatch. I was freaked out, but I decided to go back down into the bunker. Inside, it was just as creepy as I remembered. But this time, I found a room I hadn't seen before. And in that room, there was a body. I freaked out and called the cops. They showed up super fast and started checking everything out. The body was a guy, and he was really old and decayed. He had a name tag around his neck that said Adolf. I got chills when I saw that. The name was the same as the one on the ID card I found in the wallet. Was this the same Adolf? Was he the one in the bunker? I had so many questions, but no answers. The cops started a big investigation. They searched the forest, but they couldn't find any signs of the bunker, the pipe, or the hatch. They asked me a ton of questions, and I could tell they didn't really believe me. But I knew what I saw. The whole thing blew up in the news. Reporters were all over the forest, asking questions and taking pictures. But even with all the attention, we never found out who Adolf was or why there was a bunker in the forest. Even now, I still think about that day. The memory of the bunker, the footsteps, and finding Adolf's body still freak me out. It's a mystery that I guess will never be solved. Later, I called the police and told them about the situation. They informed me that there are no bunkers in that forest. They asked around, and after a while, they told me that there had never been a bunker in that specific forest. 1 week later, I went into the forest again, and everything had disappeared. The pipe, the door, the hatch, everything was gone as if it never existed. To this day, I'm still traumatized, and I can't comprehend how that was possible. And no, I don't want to disclose which forest it was or its location. But I think Germans will recognize the forest due to its size and large hills. However, please never go to such a forest, and please don't search for bunkers.
The time I messed up by trashing a treasured family memento because it made me feel excluded. And then asking Reddit for their opinion about it. My dad died when I, 16, was very young, so I have no memories of him. My mom and my brother, who is 7 years older than me, of course have many fond memories of my dad. I often felt left out when the two of them would reminisce about my father. The way they would phrase it would be something like, "Dad was always doodling in his sketchbook. Do you remember his sketchbook?" I would feel left out and like I was disappointing them by not being able to remember. Anyway, sometime when I was 13 I basically told them to shut up about my dad all the time, and there were much less conversations about my dad. None of us really understood then why the way we were communicating was so broken and hurtful for everyone. This was fine for a bit over a year until my dad came up again, and this is the day I messed up. So my dad was a really good artist and amateur woodworker. Around the house my mom hung up sketches he made of us as kids. Also hanging up is his masterpiece, this amazing wood carving he made that's a portrait of my brother as a baby. It really looks incredible, very solidly built, this is important later, and looks like it's from a gallery. My mom had this hanging up right at the front. It was the first thing people see and comment on when they came in, and my mom would start talking about how my dad was really into art and woodworking and would make sketches of his kids when he was staying up at night to put us to sleep. It would happen all the time even with my friends, and this would annoy me and made me feel excluded again. So the day I messed up, my brother was home from college and he said, "Hey, you know that wood carving of me that dad made?" And my mom said, "You remember how your dad was always making sketches of you?" Anyway, at that point it felt like they were rubbing it in, so I snapped, screamed at them to stop making me feel horrible for forgetting our perfect father, and went to my room. I was really emotional, and later when they left the house I grabbed the wood carving of my brother off the wall and broke it in half on the ground. Or at least I tried. Luckily it was carved out of a really solid piece of wood, or this would be an even bigger messed up. So failing to destroy it, I settled for throwing it in a neighbor's trash can. Then I went to my aunt's house, who's always been someone I trust, and cried to her about the whole thing. She was sympathetic, but she made me get the carving back out of the trash and explained to me that my reaction was very wrong, and texted my mom to let her know I was okay. Then I made a post on Am I the A-hole about the whole situation, and people were incredibly savage. I mean, not undeservedly so in the comments maybe, but I actually got like a borderline death threat in the DMs. Luckily my aunt was there to go through the responses with me. She would generally explain why people were saying that stuff to me and rephrase it in a gentler way so I could see where people were coming from. It's a good thing she was there, because otherwise I don't think I would have processed what people were saying. And then the scope of the messed up became even clearer later. It turns out that my brother was trying to tell me he had a surprise for me. He knew my dad was always planning on making a second wood carving of me, that's what the sketches were for, and he knew I felt left out not having one of my own. So he's taken it up as a hobby himself, and he used the shop at his school to make a carved portrait of me, based on one of Dad's sketches. They were trying to give me the gift when I flipped out, and they felt bad about making me upset, so they didn't know how to explain it after. In the end my aunt helped us clear everything up and we figured out a few things. My mom and my brother started talking me about Dad again, but learned not to quiz me about him as if they expect me to remember. I sometimes feel sad hearing about someone I'll never know directly, but in a good way, because it's nice to hear about someone who loved us so much. I can get to know him through my family's memories, and I know that they're trying to include me and not exclude me when they talk about him. My mom wanted to put the wood carving of me my brother made next to the one of my brother that Dad made, but my brother said they don't really match. My brother says he's still a beginner at wood carving, so his style isn't the same as Dad's. I think mine looks great too, it's just like a different style, more etching like a coin than deep 3D carves like a statue, I guess. My brother doesn't want me to feel like it stands out as different next to the one Dad made though. So my mom alternates which one she hangs up at the front. Usually it's mine because she says she's balancing out for lost time. Also, she makes sure mine is the one in front if it's my friends coming over. When it's not there, I keep it in my room. My brother says he's going to keep learning woodcarving, so he'll give me another version in the future that's more in dad's style, but I really like the one I have now. It looks like something my brother made, based on art my dad made, so it's like I have a gift from both of them. As for the memento I almost destroyed, sadly there was some damage. We were able to clean it up, and fortunately the damage isn't so much on the actual portrait portion of the wood, just a lot of dents and chips to the edges and corners and stuff. I feel really bad about that, but mom still likes to display and put it up and said that this way it looks more vintage and like I've made a contribution to this wood carving too. I'm pregnant and scared of telling my parents. I am pregnant. My husband and I are extremely excited and can't really believe it's happening. My husband is in the military and was around lots of toxic chemicals in his deployment to Afghanistan that affect fertility. About 2 years ago, the clinic doctors told him he would probably never be able to have kids. So this felt like a miracle. We are both college graduates with well-paying jobs. We're financially stable with a 3-bedroom house as well. We have done significantly well for ourselves, and I am grateful to be bringing a child into a functional household. My parents have never mentioned wanting grandkids and have always advised me to wait until I'm in my late 20s 30s to have kids. My mom always would tell me she can't even see me having a kid. I was on a call with my mom the other day and I told her about how one of my colleagues is having a kid that's similar in age to me. She replied, "That's good for her, but you wouldn't want that, would you?" I didn't reply, but it panicked me. I never really thought that perhaps their reaction could possibly be negative. My husband and I are telling them on Saturday, but I'm terrified of it going south. An entitled couple tried to frame me for unaliving their baby. I got into a car accident a few days ago. It was mostly my fault. I was doing a turn out of a residential driveway and while backing up, hit a car that was speeding to get past. This was around 4:45. In the car was a middle-aged father and mother with a toddler in a car seat in the back next to the door that was hit. The father got out of the car and did the immediate look at my damage act. He tells me there's a baby in the back and shows me the still sleeping child. His wife immediately gets on the phone. We pull into a parking lot to get off the busy road and wait. About 20 minutes later I grabbed their hubcap out of the road and handed it to the gentleman, and he opened the back door again and showed me the sleeping baby. At 5:40 the couple's niece and her boyfriend show up. They immediately demanded money to fix the car, and I told them we'll go through insurance. She asked several times if I really want to go that way. I told her there was no way I had the money to fix both cars, so insurance it is. She proceeds to call the police at that point. Around 6:15 the toddler finally wakes up and starts crying. The toddler had been asleep for at least an hour and a half and most likely was hungry. At 6:30 the cops show up and ask the niece if the baby needs paramedics, and the niece starts to lie to the police about how the baby has been crying since the accident and to send them. I've been in a few accidents over my years as a driver, and now I'm starting to smell what this really is, an insurance scam. I looked through my dash cam and was able to prove they sped through a red light right before the driveway where I turned from. When the cop came to ask me what happened, I told him my side of the events and showed the dash cam proving the light was red in the direction they claimed to be coming from. For good measure I told the police that the baby only started crying about 15 minutes prior to when they got there. The niece started screaming that I was lying. I then told the police officer if what she says is true, then I'd like to make a claim against them for child endangerment. They claimed that the baby was crying for the last 2 hours from the accident and never once did they call 911 for medical assistance. They called their niece to come here instead of emergency services and only asked for them after they were offered. The car seat also isn't center mounted like required by state law and should be cited. At that point the niece is calling me every name in the book like she just found out I cheated on her from Jerry Springer. I then calmly told the officer that my dashcam was running the entire time we were stopped and had it on record when the child woke up. The officer looked at her and said, "Miss, it's a crime to lie on a police report. Was the baby crying since the accident?" All of a sudden she now had to check with her aunt and uncle to find out. She withdrew her claim and the officer tossed out her witness statement because she wasn't an actual witness to anything. MAAM, yes MAAM. My mom is in the military and sometimes when she gets so upset that I have to only reply with yes ma'am and I can't leave until I do so, it's not the end of the world but a minor pet peeve. After many years of this, me and my sister got an idea. When she starts going off on us, let's salute her and as aggressively as we can, yell out MAAM yes MAAM for a month straight, even going as far as saying random pledges and singing military songs when she's in her military uniform. I rarely see her with it on because she's quick to take it off when she gets home. She hates having to stop what she's doing so people can thank her for her service, so she would go home, change, and then go to where she needed to be. 5 months in she's going off at us with pure anger in her eyes, and when she asked if I'm listening I say yeah mom, I am, and when she got mad at me because I didn't say yes ma'am, I along with my sister looked at each other and understood the assignment. We proceeded to jump out of out seats, put our hand on our foreheads, straighten our backs and yelled as long and as loud we could from the depths of our souls, yell MAAM yes MAAM. She lost it, then started laughing until tears. She started saying, "I'm sick of this poop, I can't take it anymore, stop," while still laughing. My sister and I started laughing too. A once angry mother now laughing her heart out because of a stupid inside joke her kids made. She now rarely requires us to say yes ma'am when she's mad on the off chance that we will salute her again. What was the biggest plot twist in your life? 1. Talked to this guy on Tinder for a few weeks and he really caught my interest because of how creative and flirty his texts were. We hit it off and ended up getting into a relationship after 3 months of dating. Turns out that the whole time he was using Pickup Pal to come up with his responses and plan all our dates. 2. I accidentally killed 7 people. I put a rag into a new water heater exhaust to keep debris out and installed it in a rental. I get a call a week later. there's been an accident. I show up and there's a ton of EMS and police. They ask me where the gas shutoff is, and I go down to shut the gas off and see the end of the rag I forgot sticking out of the top of the heater. Rip the rag out, shut the gas off and head upstairs only to be told all the tenants were dead. I drink all day now and sleep. It's killing me from the inside every single day, but if I say anything my family is ruined. We have a bunch of rental properties and we'd be shut down. 2.5 years ago I was in dire financial straits, so I sold my home to keep my struggling business afloat. I neglected to tell the owners that they have an 800 square foot bunker on the property that I built about 7 years ago. The bunker that I've called home since I sold it. The entrance to it is well hidden, but I still come and go very early and very late in the day. I'm a single man who keeps to himself. I'm now in a situation where I could move somewhere else, but I'll love this hidden paradise so much. 4. When I was 15 my parents were going through a divorce. My mom worked night shifts and my dad was living with a friend of his. One night my sister who was 19 at the time came home pretty drunk from a party. She was acting goofy and fell on the couch next to me. She started grabbing my leg and laughing and we started fondling. We ended up having intimacy right there. When we woke up the next day she had no recollection of the night before, so I just kept my mouth shut. Fast forward to when I'm 18. Sister is home from college and dad is over for a visit. They get into an argument and in a fit of rage my dad announces how he has never forgiven her for the abortion she got when she was 19 and subsequently killed his grandchild. He's very religious. I then realize the baby she aborted was in fact mine, and as far as I know, I am the only one who knows since she has never mentioned that night. 5. I'm eventually going to unalive myself. I don't know when, but I'm pretty sure that's where life is taking me. I've never kissed a girl and I'm approaching 30. I have panic attacks in social situations. Therapy seems to only make me feel worse, and I've decided that living so that others don't have to deal with my death isn't worth it anymore. I'm basically just waiting out my parents so they don't have to attend my funeral. 6. I once helped out my female friend's family by taking care of their cat for a week. Every day for a week, I would go over there and snoop around their house. I found my friend's diary, and proceeded to read the entire thing. I used this information to get her to like me, and she is currently my wife. 7. When I was 19 leaders attended the wedding of a friend I had feelings for. I clearly remember thinking, what a damn shame. He could do so much better. 12 years later, he's my husband now. He attacked me with a stick and I'm in trouble. I, 17, am the middle child in my family. I have 2 siblings, Brian, 25, and Emily, 12. My parents are a bit sexist and it's caused issues growing up. For example, they'd ask me and my sister to clean the whole house while my brother is allowed to sit around the whole time. There'd be times when we'd have to clean around him. Naturally, Brian is extremely egotistical. He constantly orders me and Emily around and gets extremely mad if we don't do as he asked. I've told my parents about this but they don't care and say that since he's our older brother, we have to do what he says. It got to the point where he'd steal my stuff and get away with it. And like clockwork, my parents would say that he has a right to whatever is in the house. Recently, he decided he wanted to start pranking us while we're in very compromising situations. He once scared me while I was changing and tried to take my clothes away, but I quickly kicked him. For some reason, my parents yelled at me for being useless and dumb because I wouldn't go along with his jokes. Today is where it got really bad though. I was taking a peaceful shower when I heard a creak at the door. I was already wary of my brother, but I didn't think anything would happen there. Out of nowhere, he ripped the curtains open and yelled surprise. I screamed so loud and started cursing him out. His face turned scary. I swear he looked like a rabid dog. He reached for the curtain rod and started hitting me with it. I was screaming so loud that Emily came running in. She ran for my parents' help and they managed to pull him off me. I was hurt so badly that I couldn't move. My parents looked so scared, but they didn't call for help. They just left. Emily had to call 911. I had 5 broken ribs, a concussion, and some internal bleeding. The cops came due to mandatory reporting and asked me if I wanted to press charges and I said yes. When my brother was picked up, that was the first time my parents visited me. They told me that I needed to drop the charges. I told them I couldn't, that he needed to pay for what he did to me. They told me that I deserved it, that I had been misbehaving so long and I needed to be a kinder sister. They said they'd disown me if I didn't drop the charges. I told them that they might as well. Now I'm alone in the hospital. They won't even let Emily visit me.
What moment at the office made you realize it's time to start looking for a new job? My CEO told me that I was the weakest link on the leadership team. Me, who'd set up the business from scratch when it was just me and him, who'd written all of the business processes, hired most of the employees, including several of my peers on the leadership team, negotiated many of the suppliers, bought furniture, systems, software, etc. I had the audacity to have several miscarriages and had been understandably depressed following this, yet still I was working long days, flitting between 2 offices, taking my laptop home and continuing work on an evening, going on trips to London to meet with regulators and contractors when needed. We had outgrown our current offices, so I was also scouting out new offices, so out and about doing that, too. On top of this, my boss was treating me like his assistant, getting me to do basic admin that one of the office staff could do and run errands. Because I was apparently the best person and the only one he could trust to do things right. I had had my most recent miscarriage on the 8th January that year, it was a Friday, and went straight back to work on the Monday. I took a week of convalescent leave at the end of January and my husband took me to a spa hotel to try and relax. During that week, I was called on a daily basis to ask questions and do bits of work. I stupidly took my laptop with me. On my return, my boss was about to go on a trip to Africa. I'd had a rough night and not slept well, felt under the weather so thought I'd have a bath and go into work a little late. My hours were supposedly flexible so a 9:30 a.m. start wasn't unheard of by anyone on the team. I told a colleague I'd be having a late start, in case anyone needed me. I got an angry phone call from our CEO at 9:27 a.m. as I was pulling up to the office, demanding to know where I was. I explained I was just outside and was told to come immediately to the conference room see him because we needed to discuss some issues before he left for Africa. Basically he'd spat his dummy out because he'd needed me at 9 a.m. that morning for a task and I wasn't there. When my colleague had told him I was going to be late, he had gone berserk. I got to the conference room and sat down, and was subjected to about 10 minutes of verbal attack. Apparently I was never in the office, I wasn't pulling my weight and was the weakest link on the management team. Don't worry, I gave as good as I got. I fought back and told him if he had a problem with my performance to please provide evidence of where I'd been expected or asked to do something and not done it. He couldn't provide any evidence at all, because there wasn't any. I was working above and beyond my agreed objectives, and he knew it. I started looking for a new job that night, and left a few months later. Funny that, when I sat down with our finance director to go over everything I had been doing in preparation for my leave, we managed to write 10 different job specifications for someone to replace me. I'd been doing the work of 10 people. He did actually hire 4 people to replace me. Good luck to them.
I haven't seen my family in 2 years because they covered up my brother's affair with my wife. And now they want me to come back. That's how much time has passed since I last saw my family. Why? Because they covered up the fact that my own brother was having an affair with my wife, the woman I was committed to for 7 years. The question haunts me. Am I obligated to reconcile? Or can I continue to cut ties without guilt? You see, I loved my wife. I loved her with every ounce of my being. I allowed her to live with me rent-free while she pursued her studies, supporting both of us financially at times so she could chase her dreams and passions. We had dreams of a future together, and I thought we were unbreakable. The day I found out about her affair with my brother, everything changed. What made it even more painful was finding out that some of my family members knew about it but didn't tell me. I felt completely heartbroken. I was so angry that I ended up confronting my brother and even knocked him out. After that, I quickly packed my things and left, moving far away from all the lies and betrayal they showed me. The hurt, the anger and the feeling of being betrayed are still with me. I can't help but hate them for what they did to me. Sometimes my aunt would call me. And she would sound really angry and bossy on the phone. She would say things like, "Family should always be together. You need to make up with your brother. It's what God wants." My mother, who at first seemed like she understood how I felt, started to act the same way as my aunt. She began saying the same things, telling me that I was hurting the family by not being around. Why should I come back when you knew what was going on and didn't say anything to me? I would ask her. She wouldn't answer, just staying silent. And then she would keep asking me to come back. She wouldn't even talk about my question or show that she understood how much I was hurting. I don't just hate my family. I'm also shocked by how they don't seem to care or understand how I feel. Some of my friends have left me, too, because they agree with my family. I just can't understand how everyone, even some people I used to call friends, can tell me that I should just come back and act like nothing happened. They say things like, "I need to support my family and family stick together." But those words don't mean anything to me now. Do they even know what they've done to me? It's like they don't know or care about how wrong this all is. I've questioned my own sanity, wondering if I'm missing something. Perhaps I'm the one in the wrong. But deep down, I know that's not true. I used to provide financial support to my family, but that's gone now. I see no reason to support them, and I don't give a damn if they can't pay their bills. This entire ordeal has turned my life upside down, and I find myself lost, confused, and hurt. Am I really obligated to go back to my family through thick and thin, even after such betrayal? I seriously don't see how I'm in the wrong here. But the weight of their expectations weighs heavily on me. Feeling guilty for my success, am I alone? Hello everyone. I want to apologize for any language errors in advance. I just need to vent because I am in tears and feel incredibly helpless. To give you some context, I am a 16-year-old girl living in a third world country. Since I was a child, my parents have been telling me that my main objective is to leave this place as soon as I finish high school. This is a common goal here, where parents send their children abroad in search of better education and lifestyles. The issue at hand is that in order to apply for universities overseas, especially in better countries, I need to assess a specific exam called the BAC. This exam can only be taken at a specific school, and unfortunately, it is extremely expensive. Things have been going relatively well for me, and I feel hopeful and relieved about it. I am on track to passing the exam this year, so everything seems fine for me. However, I am worried about my little brother, who I'll refer to as N. N is about 2 years younger than me and may struggle to assess this specific exam. To make matters worse, there have been political tensions that might potentially cause the exam center to close, leaving no opportunity for my brother to take the test. My mother and I have been actively searching for solutions, but N doesn't seem to be as bothered by it as we are. I understand why he doesn't want to think about it right now. Honestly, I just feel guilty. I love my brother, and I care about him deeply. I know for a fact that he would never want to stay in this difficult country, just like me. I feel bad for hopefully leaving next year while he might be left behind. It's unfair that students like us have to suffer due to political tensions between countries, and our only legal chance to escape could be fading away. Lately, I have been feeling crushed by these thoughts, and I don't know what to do. All of my older cousins managed to escape, and I hope I will too. I just want my brother to have the same opportunity and not be stuck here. I fear this situation greatly. I'm not looking for advice, but thank you for reading this far. I simply feel distressed about the whole situation, even though I am not the one directly facing it. I am quite sensitive to these matters. So yeah, I truly hope that we can find a solution.
I was unfairly fired for the way I wore my hair as a restaurant hostess. The restaurant soon shut down. When I was in high school, I got a part-time job as a hostess at an Italian restaurant with a friend of mine. The restaurant was only open 5 days a week for dinner. The restaurant was fairly new but was already filling every table every night because the food was amazing. In addition to my friend and I being the only 2 hostesses, the busboys were friends, half of the waiters were friends and the dishwasher was a friend. The owner's son was the floor manager and with the success of the restaurant started to implement new changes. Everyone must look presentable and in uniform at all times. No dirty uniforms. Even for the busboy. He was rather rude to all employees and would hover and take over our jobs right in front of customers, apologizing for our inability to do our jobs correctly. However, everyone there was fantastic at their jobs. The dishwasher even found creative ways to stay clean and tidy. The straw broke one night when my friend and I were both working the hostess stand on a packed Saturday night. The manager walked up to us and declared our hair was not compliant with the dress code. Both of us had our hair pulled back in the requisite buns. However, we both had a few stray wisps. You know, those tiny little new hairs around your face. Never mind that it was August and it was hot and we were all working as a team like crazy to make sure the night ran smoothly, sharing duties such as bussing tables and running food and drinks, underage. He loudly fired both of us on the spot in front of the entire restaurant and front staff. He then said we were required to continue to work for 2 weeks and train our replacements. I asked, "Are we fired?" He said yes. And I said firing means we don't work for you anymore. We walked out, punched our cards and went to change out of our uniforms. When we got out of the dressing room, there was a line of people waiting to change, including the busboys, half the wait staff, and the dishwasher. All were so mad about what had happened that they quit on the spot. No one liked the job anyway. We all went to IHOP to eat and were soon joined by the rest of the wait staff and the line cooks. So all that was left of the entire restaurant staff was the bartender, the owner/cook and the manager. I later heard that the owner just decided to shut down the restaurant because the only reason he started it was to provide his son a legacy from the family businesses in Italy and he decided his son couldn't handle it.
I found out my girlfriend peed in my food whenever she was angry with me. I feel so dirty. I feel so grossed out and betrayed and I keep hoping that all of this is a nightmare. I threw out any containers of food I had just because this crap got me so paranoid. I feel so violated and I don't know who to tell. My girlfriend now. Ex was a very chill and laid-back person, even in arguments. Well, we were talking about how the submarine goers don't really deserve sympathy apart from the 19-year-old, rest in peace. Her take was that a life is a life. My take was that there was more and more information coming out about the trip that any sane person would go, oh, this is dangerous. Anyway, I thought it was lighthearted because of how she always spoke calmly and even laughed at during some points until she just ended it with, "You know what? Don't talk to me." I tried to tell her it doesn't matter. She kept going, yeah, and basically telling me to shut up. So here I am feeling like crap. I wake up in the middle of the night and she's not in our bed. Whatever. I don't control her, right? And I heard the door of the bathroom open, so I figured she just went to the toilet. I feel gross detailing this out, but I could hear the pee hitting the bowl, but she didn't flush. She opened the door again and I heard her walking away. So I was worried and went to check. And this is where my whole life becomes hell. I see her in the living room with one of the food containers that had some leftovers. Next to her was a glass of. You guessed it. I could distinguish by the horrid yellow color and smell. Of course, I saw her pour it in, and I immediately screamed at her, demanding to know what the heck she thinks she's doing. She had those deer caught in headlight looks unflinched, causing her pee to stain the table in her hand. I kept screaming at her and she started crying, saying she's sorry over and over. I told her I demand an explanation or she's free to call her mom and leave. This instance. Apparently the reason she's always so calm and happy the morning after arguments where she gets mad is because she does this. She drinks a whole lot of water, and in the night when I sleep, she goes and pours it in food. Apparently this started with simply pouring it on my belongings. I was disgusted. I screamed at her some more, and I don't even feel guilty that she cried. I told her to get out of my house or I'm calling the police. She tried to beg, but eventually left. I sent her a message to get someone to get her stuff that were over and blocked her. I don't even know what to say. I feel violated, disgusted. The fact she knew what she was doing. Watch me eat it and never felt guilty. And I just. Dang. I ended up pretending to be mute on a flight by accident, and then embarrassingly forgot and broke character. This happened a while ago but I still cringe when I think about it. I hopped on a short flight from Dallas to San Antonio to visit my brother. I ended up on an aisle seat towards the very back of a packed plane. As I sat, the guy seated next to me was busy, and I decided not to bug him with the quick hello or the classic, business or pleasure question that people tend to ask. About 15 minutes into the flight I began to eat one of those very dry Biscoff crackers. Without water on hand, I realized I overcommitted my salivary gland for some real work. Of course, at this exact moment, my seatmate begins his opening introduction. I nod to him and smile, but I was not about to open my mouth to pepper him with Biscoff cracker dust. Unaware of my dilemma, he asks me a question. I motion to my throat with my hand to suggest I was finishing a bite. His eyes go large and he quickly apologizes and turns red in the face with embarrassment. I was surprised by his reaction and thought his response was a little over the top. A few seconds later I realized that he thought I was motioning that I could not speak. No problem, I would clarify everything as soon as I could swallow my cracker. Unfortunately, this cracker must have been made from some properties that send all moisture to another dimension. As I waited, the stewardess came to save the day with a drink cart. She asked me what I wanted to drink, and I just pointed at a Sprite can. As I did this, my seatmate clarified my choice by verbally telling the stewardess my selection. I could tell that he felt a sense of accomplishment that he was able to help me communicate given my perceived disability. Maybe it made him feel better after having asked me a question that I was unable to answer. As the flight continued, I realized that I accidentally committed myself to becoming mute. I was at the point of no return, so I figured I would just go with it. I didn't want to make him feel stupid. He began to tell me a couple things about his family. He mentioned a relative with a similar impairment following a stroke. He also showed me a picture of his dog on his phone. He knew I could not respond, so he never asked me any questions. I just nodded and smiled at anything he said to be polite, not uttering a sound. Eventually our plane lands. By this time I forgot about my act. I sat patiently as people began to deplane. Being at the very back of the plane, I knew I had to wait, so I remained seated. My phone vibrates. I see that it is my brother calling me. I accept the call and enthusiastically say, "What's up? I just landed. Give me about 10 minutes and I will meet you out front." My memory sends me a notice a little too late to remind me that I am supposed to be playing the role of mute person on this plane. I slowly look over to me seatmate to see if he really even noticed. His head was directly aimed at me. He had the most disgusted look on his face, like I punched a baby bunny. I turned red. I was so embarrassed that I couldn't think of anything to say to make the moment less awkward. A part of my brain that does not get outside much convinced me to get out of the plane quickly. I turned the thought into action and I quickly got out of my chair and grabbed my backpack. I looked back at the guy and I can confirm that he was more committed to maintaining his disgusted expression than I was at being mute. I quickly looked at the person in front of me standing in the aisle. I could go nowhere. I remained standing for about another eternity until the line started to ease up. I finally made my escape, but this moment still haunts me. For the first time, my adopted daughter truly felt comfortable with me. Quick summary, me and my wife of 4 years wanted to start a family, but she cannot have kids of her own. So after getting in touch with our local adoption agency, and with them living with us for a few months with us as the foster parents, we officially became the parents of 2 beautiful girls named Amelia, 7, and Judy, 11. They had been under the care of an actually very sweet and loving older couple who were their foster parents. But obviously with them getting up there in age, it was getting harder for them to take care of the girls. So that's when we stepped in. Now when I say she was standoffish, I'm referring to Amelia. She wasn't necessarily scared of me or my wife or anything like that. In fact, she was quite comfortable and adjusted very quickly to living with us. She just saw me as a bit intimidating because I'm rather tall, 6'5", and have lots of tattoos. I think she thinks I'm like a biker or gangster or something lol. And anytime I'd ask her something like how school was, it was usually just one-word answers. But whenever my wife would ask, it'd be hard to get her to stop talking. This happened when we were the foster parents as well. So the incident in question happened earlier this afternoon. My wife had taken Judy to the mall to get some more stuff for school, and I watched Amelia. We had breakfast together and she politely asked if she could go out in the backyard to play. I was doing some work on my laptop in the kitchen and I hear my neighbor's dog, a German Shepherd, barking and don't think much of it. But then a few seconds later I hear her yell "Daddy" for the first time ever. I jog outside and see her standing there on the verge of tears as my neighbor's dog on the other side of the chain-link fence is sitting there looking concerned. I go over and kneel down next to her asking, "What's wrong, sweetie? Did he scare you?" And all she does is nod and wrap her arms around me trying not to cry. I smile and tell her it's okay sweetie, he's not gonna hurt you, and I pick her up and she's holding on to me with all her strength. I immediately figure out what happened and know the dog isn't a threat because he is the biggest goofball you can imagine. There was a ball next to the fence that Amelia and her sister must have played with and the dog saw her and made the connection in his head that she wanted to play catch and was trying to get her attention to play. I know this because he's done the same thing when I cut the grass or do yard work and just wants someone to play with. He's honestly the cutest thing. She calms down enough and, while she's still holding on to me, I get the dog to stand up and hold my hand out for him to sniff and lick my hand and say "See? He's not mean at all," and I pet him all over his head and he melts in happiness. I then ask her if she wants to try and she doesn't say anything except slowly reaches her hand forward and lets him smell her and she laughs as he licks her hand and she giggles, and I kiss her on the cheek for good cuteness sake. I even let her throw the ball and he quickly brings it back and dumps it in her hand and she's laughably grossed out and completely forgets why she was scared in the first place. Eventually we both head back inside and I make her lunch and it's like an immediate transformation of how she is with me. I just talk about the work I was doing and she's asking me loads of questions like she does my wife and it really just feels awesome. Just wanted to share this story and hope it made some of you smile. What's the biggest mistake you've watched someone make in their personal life? I was married. As it turns out, that was the biggest mistake I've made in my life. While married, I made a good living as a financial consultant and had especially good luck in the stock market. We lived well, not rich but with no complaints. We adopted a boy. My wife enjoyed playing with my son while he was a baby and a toddler, but as he grew up she had less and less use for him. This broke into all-out war between them when he was a teen. At a time when he really needed a parent, she had no use for him. He was your typical teen but she kept wanting him to be her little baby, controlling his every move and thought. She finally announced she could not live with him anymore and she moved out to an apartment. A year later, I bought her a house. After 3 more years, she showed no signs of coming back and was very happy to let me pay for everything. She was not working. She also spoils my son by trying to buy his love with frequent gifts and money, but always on her terms. I tried to get her to try to teach him a little responsibility but it did not help. I finally asked for a divorce. I am not proud of the fact that she and her lawyer took me to the cleaners. She got her house, a car, a $3,400 per month alimony and all of our savings, about $560,000. She also took $100,000 that we had set aside for my son's college. He was 18 then and considered an adult. I got our house and 2 investment properties we owned. I should point out that my ex is obsessed with money and income. She had more than enough to live on, but she wanted more. 2 days after the divorce became final, she took a full-time job. Within a month, her monthly income was over $7,000. My income was less than half that, and I also was paying 100% of my son's expenses. I sold everything and moved 50 miles away. Flash forward 3 years. My ex and I communicate only as it relates to my son. I usually try to get her to stop giving my son so much money and try to help him to learn responsibility and accountability. This sometimes gets into discussions of money. I innocently asked if she was still working. She said yes. I mentioned that the interest income from her savings would easily cover her comfortably for life. She said she had already invested most of it. I was shocked because she never showed any interest in the stock market or investments. I asked, invested in what? She said she had talked to a financial advisor and bought into a special annuity that guarantees an income for life. She put $450,000 and the title of her house into this annuity, and then when she turns 72, it will pay her a monthly income of $2,000 for the rest of her life. It is hard to describe how bad that investment is. There is so much wrong with it. It is typical that the financial advisor in these kinds of deals took a huge commission, probably in the range of $12,000 to $20,000 or more. Her house will probably be worth about $250,000 to $350,000, plus the cash means she gave them about $800,000. Her $2,000 per month represents an ROI, return on investment, of less than 3%. In 20 plus years of investing, I averaged between 8% and 18% on all of my investments. The larger the investment, the larger the ROI. She could easily have gotten 10% or better. She could draw $2,000 per month from the $800,000 for 400 months, over 33 years, with no investment ROI at all. With even a modest ROI, she could draw out more than that per month forever. Her mother died at 77, so she is not likely to live a lot longer than that, but let's assume she lives to be 82, 10 years of receiving her annuity. That means she will draw out about $240,000 and then die. The balance of the money and the house then goes to the annuity to keep. She will have lost $560,000, not counting any ROI from investments. She has written a will that gives everything except her car to her brother and or his family. She has given her car to my son but has left him out of any money, property or college funds. Using only the cash amount of $450,000, I am very confident I could achieve an ROI of 8%, which would equate to $3,000 per month for life starting immediately and without ever touching the principal or the house. Upon death, my son would inherit the full value of the estate. After she described what she had done, I was filled with a lot of mixed emotions. I was angry she had not considered our son in her will or in her investment. I was shocked at how bad this investment was and that financial scam artist had taken advantage of her. I am not proud of the fact that a part of me smiled that she got taken to the cleaners. What's the most insignificant amount of power you've seen get to someone's head? Oh. I'm going to tell you about Mike. I used to work at a gas station chain that's pretty ubiquitous in the western United States. I was an assistant manager, and my job was actually to train ASMs and outside hire GMs for other stores. I was 23, female, and looked 16. Now I never had a female trainee who had a problem with this, even the ones who were twice my age and had actual college degrees in management. I was there to teach them how this specific chain worked, and I was good at my job, and I wanted them to be good at their jobs, and that was that. But a lot of the male trainees did have a problem, especially the ones twice my age. And it was weird, male GMs and male non-trainees had no problem with me, and younger male trainees didn't tend to have a problem with me, either. One of my favorite coworkers was male, 3 times my age, used to be a jeweler, and had a beard almost to his belt buckle, and he would throw down with people who questioned my competence based on my looks. I didn't ask him to do this, either. He just decided I reminded him of his daughter and that I needed an advocate against the shitheads. But then there was Mike. Mike was in the shithead category. Mike was always kind of condescending toward me. He had a BA in business administration or something like that, and he'd previously owned a small business that tanked in the recession. And by owned, I don't mean he was an owner-operator. I mean he put up the money and other people ran the business. This job was below him and he wanted to be sure we all knew what he used to do. But I did my best, until the day of the Coke invoice. So on this particular day, we had 3 orders coming in, Frito-Lay, Pepsi, and Coca-Cola. Frito had already come and gone. Pepsi usually came around 8 at night. The next on my list was Coke. So I said to Mike, I need to show you how to put in an invoice today. I'm going to have you run the Pepsi one because the Coke one is really complicated and I don't want to start you on that. What made Coke complicated on that particular day was that we just had a store reset, and so I had a lot of new, previously unsold product coming in, plus I had a few credits to return and there'd been an issue with the previous week's invoice my driver was going to correct. It's not rocket science, but I didn't want to use it for a first invoice. My plan for his training was that I'd do a quick count on the Pepsi order and, after confirming it was all there, I'd have Mike do the official check-in and show him how to sign off, and then he could practice credits on another vendor the next day. Reasonable, right? Show you the basic steps, add the next most basic step, and then from there go over more unusual situations like part of my order is missing. I thought so, Anyway, so Coke arrives, my driver jacks the pallets into the store and Mike steps out from behind the counter with his chest puffed up. I said, "Mike, can you watch the front while I get this checked in?" And I shit you not, this dude, my trainee, looks at me and says, "Don't you worry your little head about that, darling, I'm a store manager. I can handle invoices." I think my mouth actually dropped open, but nothing came out.
First of all, this dude was not yet a store manager. He hadn't even started his official classes yet because I hadn't signed off on his yes, he knows how to do X, Y, and Z basic store functions training yet.
Second of all, he hadn't come to us from a retail background, owner/investor, remember? So no, as a matter of fact he did not know how to handle invoices. And third of all, my little head, darling, how disrespectful and exist can you be to your trainer without actually crossing the line into harassment? The real hero in this story is the Coke driver, by the way. He was slightly younger than Mike, but still old enough to be my dad, and he liked me because I was competent and did my job and sometimes I gave him free donuts. So my Coke driver looks at Mike, and then at me, and goes, "Who's this ass clown?" Mike quickly deflated and scuttled back behind the register. I checked in the order, corrected the previous invoice, dealt with the credits, confirmed the next order, all the fun stuff you've got to do with big deliveries. Coke went to go put the stuff in the cooler and I ran to the back office to put the invoice numbers in. Came back out and Mike was gone. 3 days later, my boss's boss called me to ask if I knew why Mike had quit. I said I didn't, that I only knew he'd walked out in the middle of a shift, and relayed the invoice story to her. I don't think I'd ever heard her laugh so hard in my life. Apparently Mike had a string of complaints from his 2 previous trainers about exist remarks, but because her stores tended to be very female heavy crews, I don't think this was ever planned. We just didn't get a lot of male applicants. He'd never been confronted by a male crew member. The Coke guy was the first man who'd actually called him out on his behavior, and apparently Mike just couldn't take it. My ex-fiancée of 8 years broke up with me over text 3 years ago, and disappeared. Now she is trying to rejoin our circle of mutual friends, and I am struggling with it extremely hard. Me and a girl I'll call Jessica, were a couple for over 8 years and were engaged for 3 of them. I met her through a mutual friend in my group of friends. We ended up hitting it off pretty quickly as our dorky and nerdy hobbies aligned really well. I personally fully expected to marry this person, and spend the rest of my life with her. In early 2019, her job offered her an amazing opportunity to temporarily work 4 months in the company's satellite office in New Zealand. She was an environmental engineer, to temporarily manage and lead a new team. It was very sudden, and I was not really happy with the idea, but she really wanted this chance and opportunity, so off she went. I flew out to visit her after about 2 months, only when I arrived at the airport I got a text message from her. The message was short and more or less consisted of, she was sorry but after thinking it through, she thinks it would be best if we went our separate ways from now on. She then completely blocked me on almost every single form of social media, cell phone, etc. I was confused, devastated and became an absolute wreck. I remember completely breaking down in Auckland airport. I spent the next 4 days living at a motel basically trying to get into contact with her in any shape or form. She had apparently blocked every one of our friends from our circle. Even her close friends from our circle of friends were shocked, confused and basically lost. Even her parents were extremely confused when I called them. Her dad, who I was extremely close with, we coached pee-wee hockey together, and played a lot of beer league for hockey together, refused to believe it at first. I was a mess for a solid year, but my close circle of friends managed to drag me out of my hellish hole along with some therapy. Her best friends became close friends to me. About a year ago, she invited some of her old close friends to her wedding, among a bunch of other people from our group. No one went, and I quickly found out which hurt me even more. Over a year ago I started dating one of her old friends, as me and her had gotten close over the last 2 years or so. She felt quite hurt when Jessica basically ghosted her. Unfortunately there was some awkwardness because she fully knew I was not fully over my ex, but she has been a supportive and amazing person and I am extremely happy with her. Life was going great for me. Then in December Jessica apparently moved back home, after divorcing a few months after getting married. I don't know much and I don't want to know. However, she is making this hugely concentrated effort to reconnect with people in our friend group, which is resulting in some very conflicted feelings for some people. Last week I found out that Jessica and some of my friends have started playing D&D, which frankly made me feel like crap. Part of me just wants to move on from this but I am struggling hard. While my significant other has been extremely supportive, I just feel numb and don't really know what to do. Today Jessica sent me a long Facebook message basically apologizing to me for what she did, and asked to be friends. I didn't respond and blocked her. I told my significant other, and I just felt like I was going to break down. Right now my significant other is saying she is worried about me, and keeps asking me what do I want to do. My significant other confessed that Jessica had sent her a similar message a few weeks ago, and she told her off. I don't know what I am supposed to do. I can't order my friends to not be friends with her. I just feel like a mess and I am struggling with this as I feel like I'm a teenager dealing with stupid drama again.
I implied I could leave him. This is how he reacted. We've been together for 8 years and have a 6-year-old boy. We still aren't married. I just wish we were. It's confusing why we can do everything together except have a wedding. I'm the mother of his son, and it's embarrassing when people assume we are or ask me why we aren't yet. It came up tonight. He gave me the same answer he always does, because when we're married I want us to have another child and I want you stop working. I have to be in a certain financial position for this to happen. I'm unsure the exact number he makes. He doesn't really involve me in what he considers his business, but it's enough for us to live comfortably in an expensive city. I make 30 an hour but only work part-time. He handles the finances. It's true that I want to be a stay-at-home mother and I want another baby, but I will wait. When I say this, he brushes me off. I said, "Sometimes I think you're playing with me. I felt this way for a while but I've never said it." He chuckled and said, "Yeah, okay." I said, "I don't want to waste my time hoping you'll follow through." For a moment I felt like I wanted to leave him, or at least stand up to him. He said, "If you're implying you'll leave, I think we both know that's not going to happen. I never want to be a man who puts his hands on his girl, but I will do anything to keep my family intact. Do you understand?" I said yes. He told me we'd find productive ways to solve my unhappiness. I feel so many muddled emotions. He's intimidating but I know how soft he can be. I resent him but I want a happy home. I don't even know it anymore.
What is the funniest funeral you've attended? There was this rich old broad, and her family had been waiting for her to die for a bunch of years so they could get her money. Real stuck up, shitty people, and the Rob hated them. I guess she either didn't have anyone else to leave her money to, or she figured that her awful family would contest the will if everything wasn't left to them. Knowing how status conscious these shitty relatives are, our OB decided, fine, they can have the stupid money, but I'm gonna make them suffer for it. So when our OB finally passes away, her lawyer approaches the family with her instructions for how her funeral is to be run. According to our OB's will, the only way they get the money is if they follow these instructions to the letter. I don't remember all the absurd details in her instructions except for the PS2 resistance. Our OB required an open casket funeral, with all family members in attendance, and demanded that her corpse be dressed up like Bozo the Clown. Makeup, red nose, crazy hair, massive shoes, the works. The family tried to protest, but our OB's lawyer had tied this thing up beautifully. Perfectly ironclad. They either attended the Bozo the Clown funeral, or they didn't get a dime, so they did it. These stuck-up assholes had to stand there for hours, glowering, taking weird looks from all their friends and neighbors as people got close to the casket and realized our OB was dressed like a freaking clown. According to a funeral parlor employee, who had dressed our OB and applied the makeup, the best part of the service came when they tried to shut the casket and couldn't, because the massive shoes got in the way. They had to bend these 24-inch shoes and have to get the lid closed. I never had the honor of meeting the brilliant, cantankerous old bitch, but she's one of my biggest goddamn heroes. Realize the man I'm currently with is cheating on his fiancée. I told him I needed to go home early and he asked if he could take a shower before we left and I said that was fine. I tried to be cordial but I'm sure my icy eyes gave me away. He seemed to get progressively more uncomfortable the longer we interacted. We walked down to the lobby together and then after offering to pay for my valet expenses, to which I said he didn't need to worry about that, he then said see you later, kissed me on the cheek, and went to get his car from valet. He then came back in once he found out that his valet was charged to my card and assured me he would pay me for that. I asked him if he has Venmo and he said he did, so I said I'd send him my username. It's not my real name, and then he left. So I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna get reimbursed for any of the hotel or even his valet expense. I've made a fake Instagram account and will message his fiancée soon. She was not consenting to this or aware of it. She handled it so gracefully, thanked me and told me I was a good person. I'm heartbroken for her and pretty pissed at him. She and I actually had a pretty long conversation after she confronted him. Apparently he told her this was his version of a bachelor party. She kicked him out of the house. I encouraged her to dump his butt, reminding her of her worth, and it seems like she might be moving in that direction, thank God. We actually seem to get along so well that I kinda wish we could be friends. And, just for giggles, I decided to get some closure / reclaim my power by sending him a Venmo request for his portion of the valet. The funny thing is that last night at dinner, I had made a joke about him needing to repent. It's a long story, without having any idea he was actually cheating on his fiancée. So my Venmo request said, guess I was right about you needing to repent. Paying for the valet would be a step in the right direction but you've got a long way to go. Have fun in Cancun. He eventually completed the request. I really didn't expect him to, so now I'm kinda wishing I charged him for the hotel room for one night as well. Oh well.
My sister ruined our grandpa's funeral. My family is very religious but not the crazy controlling type of religious. I don't believe in God and they've never treated me differently because of that. They've never turned my sister away because she's bisexual and an atheist. They treat everyone like a human being no matter what. My sister hates when there's peace and quiet. Whenever there's drama it's usually my sister behind it. She gaslights people into fighting and loves to make people hate each other. The one thing she's never been able to break apart with her lies was my family until yesterday. My grandpa was the nicest man I've ever met. He was hardworking and loved to teach and help others. He passed away recently and we held the funeral yesterday. There was over 100 people in attendance and everything was going as good as a funeral could go. My great uncle asked us to pray and as everyone bowed their heads to pray my sister stood up. She started screaming that she wished their grandpa was sent to hell. She said that she was glad he was dead. I had to physically drag her out of the funeral home.
I got drunk and made love with my married cousin. I feel sick about it. My 27 female extended family isn't close. There's a lot of us. My dad has 3 siblings and my mom has 4. Most of them have children. My dad and a couple of others were career military, so we moved around a few times. Prior to about a year ago, the cousin in question I think I met maybe 4 times total. His mom, my dad's sister, is the oldest sibling and my dad is the youngest. There's a decent age gap between us, 15 years or so, I don't know exactly. When I got out of college in 2022, I went late. I got a job in the state where my parents and some of their siblings live, home state. I moved to a small town by a larger city, work from home. I have to go in once a week and it's about a 90-minute drive. My aunt called me to let me know that her son and his wife lived in the city and they were willing to show me around. Her son James and I texted back and forth, and I met him and Anne for dinner. I'd never met James's wife before. Anne and I immediately got along. She's beautiful both inside and out, and we have the same sarcastic sense of humor. If she wasn't married and I was into girls, I'd marry her. After dinner, we went and had drinks, and they insisted I stay at their house instead of driving home late at night. This started a pattern. Every couple of weeks, I'd come to work at the office, then head to James and Anne's house and we'd hang out. Anne has some kind of back damage from her youth. She was thrown from a horse into a wooden fence, so when she wasn't feeling well, we'd either stay home with her or sometimes James and I would go out on our own. While they always said it was no trouble, I didn't feel right constantly crashing at their place, so sometimes I would drive home or get a hotel if I'd had too much to drink. Anyway, fast forward to this last weekend, I went to the office and got off a bit early. I texted James, who told me to head to their house because he wasn't off work yet. When I got there, Anne was propped up in her recliner with a heat pad on her back. She was having a bad day. I admit I was really disappointed, because we were supposed to go to this club and James had promised to teach me to dance. I told her I'd just go ahead and go home, but she said no and James and I should go out. So he got home and she verbally pushed us out the door. We went to the club, danced, drank a little, then he got tired of me stepping on his feet and we went to a nearby wine place and drank and talked. By the time the place closed, neither of us was in any shape to drive. I was drunk, really drunk, we both were. I remember us arguing, because he told me I was coming home and I told him I'd already paid for a hotel. I'd stayed at their place a lot lately. I got an Uber, and we were going to share. We got to my hotel and he said he'd see me to my room because at that point I wasn't walking straight. We were being goofy, singing and stuff. I threw a shoe at him in my room, missed by a mile, and he fell out of his chair laughing. We were that level drunk. At some point I passed out. So in the morning, I woke up with a massive headache. James was in the bed next to me. Initially, I didn't really remember much, but when you wake up exposed next to a person and you're sore in certain places, you know what happened. I snuck out of bed, gathered my clothes, then went into the bathroom and got dressed, and I cried. A lot. I was sick a couple times. I guess I woke James up, because I heard knocking at the door, James saying he's sorry and will I please come out so we can talk. I came out a sniveling, smelly, crying mess. I asked him if we made love, and he nodded. I told him I was sorry and I was a terrible person and kept rambling. He wet me a rag to wipe my face and started talking. He said he was sorry too, and he was taking responsibility because he was older and should have known better than to get so drunk. I asked what we were going to do about Anne. He said he felt he should tell her the truth and it was probably best if I wasn't there. He told me he would make sure she knew it wasn't my fault. He left and later I left. I don't know what happened between James and Anne, but Sunday I got a long text from Anne. It was kinder than I feel I deserve. She said she would like to speak to me about what happened but not right away. She doesn't want me to contact her or James for a while. She did say she wouldn't tell anyone. I texted her back and told her I understood, how sorry I was, and I wouldn't contact either of them till she said so. I've started to remember a bit of what happened, and we definitely made love. I feel sick and horribly guilty. I don't know if it's weird that I feel worse about the married part than the cousin part. I almost want to up and move across the country to hide from this. My son kicked me in the stomach and my husband slapped him. Our son is 11 years old. Lately he's wanted to stay home from school a lot. I know that it's not good but I've let him. He's so sleepy in the morning, it breaks my heart to try to force him, and I can't really force him anymore. I also have 2 younger children I need to tend to in the morning. I've asked my son if something is wrong at school but he said no, I just want to sleep. My husband goes to work before our son has to wake up, but he caught on to him missing school and he was not happy about it. He spoke to him, and my son has been very good for the past couple weeks. Until Friday I went to wake him, and he said, "Mommy, I'm too tired." He rarely calls me mommy anymore. I felt bad but I kept trying to coax him out of bed. I didn't want to go against my husband. My son told me Dad's not here, chill. I told him that his father wants what's best for him, and so do I. I tried to touch him and he kicked me in the stomach. I was shocked and it was very painful. I left his room and cried in the bathroom. I didn't try to fight him anymore because I had to take care of my other kids. My son has never hurt me like that before. I ended up having a bruise on my stomach. When my husband was home and found out what had happened, he told me he talked to him. Our son was playing video games and he called him over. He asked him, "Did you kick your mother?" My son started saying, "I'm sorry, Dad." I was mad. My husband slapped him across the face. He asked him, "Do you want to kick me now?" My son shook his head no. My husband said, "Because you know I'm stronger than you are. You're not tough for hurting your mother. You will never act like that again. Do you understand?" When my husband let him go, I went over to check on him. His face was so red and he was fighting back tears. I got an ice pack and I was icing his face. He told me it's okay. I deserved that. He hugged me and later made me a card apologizing, which was very sweet. I know husband just wanted to teach our son, but I didn't like him hitting our child. In our culture that's common, but my husband has taken better approaches. I don't know if I'm being oversensitive, but it's hard to see your child hurt as a mother even if my husband is right.
I clogged the toilet at work and it overflowed. It clogged and overflowed. I panicked, tried to use paper towels to clean up the water, didn't work. Went to storage closet and grabbed a wet floor sign and fled. Currently on my way to Haiti to never be seen again. Worst panic attack of my life, RN. I think I lost my place in heaven.
I told my dad I've never been with a girl, and he tried to play matchmaker. He doesn't know I'm gay. A few days ago I, 20 male, decided to visit my dad at his house. It was his birthday. I showed up with wine. We got a little drunk. Maybe more than a little. When my dad was done going on and on about how much he missed my mom since she divorced him, he changed the subject and focused on my love life. He asked if I had a girlfriend and I said no. Then he asked if I've ever had a girlfriend because he's never seen me with a girl. I said never. My dad poured the last drop of wine in my glass and asked if I still had my V card. I was tempted to lie, but I paused too long, so I said yes. My dad said I had no reason to feel ashamed about my intimate life, but encouraged me to have as much love-making as possible before I end up married to a person whose private parts come with an impenetrable encryption. I ignored the obvious reference to my mom's you-know-what and called it a night. I asked my dad if I was allowed to sleep in the spare bedroom because I didn't want to drive home drunk. My dad said I was more than welcome. I must have been sleeping for less than an hour before I woke up to the sound of my dad knocking on the door. I don't remember what I mumbled as I opened my eyes, but the moment my dad heard my voice, he entered my room with another person. It was a girl. My dad introduced her by name, but did the air quotes thing with his fingers to imply that it was a fake name. I could tell my dad was still drunk. Exhibit A, he continued making the air quote gesture, even when it was no longer necessary. Not gonna lie, I was still drunk too, but not drunk enough to disregard the weird stuff that was happening. Without giving me proper time to react, my dad quickly said the girl knew exactly what to do before closing the door on his way out. The girl did not know what to do. She did nothing other than awkwardly wait for me to say something. I eventually asked her what was going on and she said my dad hired her to sleep with me. I died of embarrassment, especially when the girl asked me to explain if I was on the zero experience, or the some experience end of the V card spectrum. Without thinking, I said I was gay. It was the first time I actually said it out loud. The girl sat down on the bed and asked if I was a top or a bottom. I shrugged and said I didn't know yet. My face must have been so red at that moment. The girl said if I was willing to go shower, then she would basically be willing to motorboat my behind. To be honest, I considered it. I'm human. I'm turned on. However, the situation was way too weird for me to be completely comfortable doing something that intimate with someone I didn't know at all. I said, thank you, but no thank you to the girl and apologized for my dad putting both of us in an awkward position. She said she understood and for some reason thought it was necessary to mention that my dad was one of their regular customers. She made it clear for the record that she never made love with my dad, but explained that some of her older coworkers at the service really enjoyed spending time with him. She said she can't wait to tell the other SX workers that she met me because apparently my dad loves to talk about his son with the people he pays to screw. I was not psychologically prepared for the unexpected discussion regarding my dad's intimate life. The girl had a severe case of motor mouth. When she finally stopped talking, I learned that my dad sleeps with these workers who kind of look like my mom and that women closing their eyes with too much food in their mouth and saying, turns him on. The girl apologized for abusing my good listening skills and asked if there was nothing she could do for me. I said she could keep my sexuality between the two of us. She said her lips were sealed until the time comes to perform her services. My dad was passed out in the living room when we approached the front door. I went back to bed when the girl was gone and eventually fell asleep. The following morning, I confronted my dad. I said I didn't appreciate what he did and made sure he understood that he wasted his money because nothing happened. My dad was apologetic and promised never to cross that line again, no matter how much alcohol is involved. Despite his apology, the mood was still somewhat tense. I decided to break the tension by closing my eyes and saying, while eating breakfast. The look on my dad's face was priceless. I lost my appetite soon afterwards because I instantly regretted doing something that might excite my father. I made my daughter run away, but I don't feel sorry. I don't think she's my kid in complete honesty. My wife and I have 3 daughters. The oldest is 16, the middle is 14, and the youngest is 10. My entire family and my wife's family all have straight hair. My oldest and youngest also have straight hair. Then there's my middle with curly blonde hair and green eyes. The rest of the family have brown hair and brown eyes. I admittedly am not very close with her because I had doubts that she was mine and I had a hard time bonding with her due to that. My middle daughter insists that she needs special shampoo and conditioner because of her curly hair. She found some that wasn't too expensive so I bought it for her, but she goes through the conditioner like water. She came to me after a little over a month and said that she needed another bottle. I told her she doesn't and that her conditioner should last her at least another month and probably longer, but she insists that you need to use a lot of conditioner for curly hair. I bought her another bottle and told her to use less because she wasn't getting another one for at least 2 months. She used it again in a month so I bought her shampoo and conditioner from the dollar store. She had a meltdown about how this is going to ruin her hair and that she just got it to a place where she liked it and it was manageable. She blames us for her hair being uncontrollable for most of her life because we didn't learn how to take care of curly hair, even though it's not different than straight hair. She even threatened to shave her head, which I know she won't do because she's obsessed with her hair. Now she's refusing to speak to me and she's being extremely disrespectful to me and my wife. My wife thinks we should give in, but I think she needs to learn her lesson. She apparently had enough because the next day she ran away. I can't help but feel it's my fault. Update, she's not coming back. We found out she had been planning this for months. My oldest daughter was in on it and helped her hide the fact that she's been working after school for months. She taught her how to hide her money and showed her what to put in her bag and where to hide it. What a snake she is. When they were leaving for school, my middle daughter had a new backpack. My wife asked about it and middle said that it was her friend's but she didn't want it so she gave it to her, which was completely plausible considering that friend gives her stuff all the time. A couple of hours later we got a call from the school saying that my middle daughter wasn't there. My wife came home and checked her room and she found a note on her dresser saying that she couldn't handle living with me anymore. What an absolute moan she is. Back in my day, my parents made me live in a cold house so my dad could afford his beer at the weekend and you didn't see me crying and running off. My wife has a sister around 45 miles away and our middle daughter showed up to her house after being missing for 3 days. She refused to go home and threatened to run away again if she tried to make her see us. At first my wife told me to move out so our middle daughter could come home but she quickly realized that she can't afford to live in our house on her income alone because I am significantly the breadwinner, plus our oldest and youngest deserve to have their parents together, so the middle is going to stay with her aunt until we figure out a plan that works for everyone. I personally feel that she is being dramatic but I also need to ensure I do not come across as insensitive. I'm starting to hate my autistic best friend. I feel like I'm a jerk for this but I'm really starting to hate my autistic best friend. She self-diagnosed herself a couple of years ago, which is fine by me, I really don't care about that. But I've been thinking about our friendship and I'm really beginning to hate her but I feel like it's wrong because she is autistic and I know she has trouble with social cues so it isn't her fault necessarily. However, she treats me really awful and I'm really getting fed up with it. We met from a mutual friend and quickly became close. We would just share memes and talk about stuff we liked. However, I realized it was very one-sided pretty quickly. Throughout our friendship, I feel like I'm always the one to contribute. I have bought her lots of gifts throughout our friendship, clothes, stuffed animals, shoes, etc. Yet she has never once given me a gift of any sort. She just talks about herself, how hot she is, details about her intimate life, what she is doing, and what she's up to, but never asks about me or what I'm doing. I feel like I can't even talk to her about anything because it just turns into her talking about herself. I once told her that my mom had just fallen into a coma and I was really stressed out and worried, and all she did was say uh-oh then started to talk about how hot she looked in an outfit. Another time, I told her that I had just gotten into a car accident and was a bit shaken up, and she didn't even acknowledge it and just started to talk about the intimacy she had the night before. I started a new birth control and it sent me into a depressive spiral just from the new hormones. I told her about it but in response, she sent me photos of her butt and asked if she was thick or not. A few years ago, I was in a depressive spiral and attempted to unalive and was hospitalized. When I was back home and I texted her why I was gone for a few days, she just heart reacted my message and then started talking about her breasts and how she thought they were getting bigger. Things like this just constantly add up and make me feel like she doesn't even see me as a person. I once told her about 2 years ago that I felt like she doesn't treat me equally in our friendship, and she told me that it was her autism that makes it hard to have relationships and that I can't be upset at her for it since she cannot control it. I just feel like a jerk if I was to cut off the friendship since I do understand she has autism and relationships/social cues are difficult, but I don't even feel respected whatsoever and it depresses me to be friends with someone like this. Lawyers, what was your best case? In 1973, my parents had enough money to build a little ranch house in the country. The small bank in town approved the mortgage and the bank signed a contract to give Bob the money to build the house. Bob, as it turns out, was overbooking himself all over town, leaving his clueless minions to do the actual work. The build took longer and longer, with more and more work having to be ripped out and redone. We're not talking about using the wrong color paint or nailing up some wonky trim, here. The architect forgot to fully erase a line on the blueprints and the framers built a wall through the bathtub. My mother was told don't put anything heavy in the kitchen cabinets because they were attached to the drywall, not the studs, using a few roofing nails through the back of each cabinet. The garage door opening was framed into the living room instead of towards the driveway. And so on. When the bank's representative showed up for the final inspection, my parents met him in the front yard and refused to sign off on Bob's work. Then representative became angry, as the bank had paid Bob a lot of money. He strode to the front door and pulled on the doorknob, whereupon the entire door, casing included, fell on him. It had simply been wedged, not nailed, into place. The bank called Bob, who finally showed up to supervise the work himself. The only problem was that Bob wasn't any better at building a house than his minions were. My parents still refused to sign off on the house. My mother was a stay-at-home mom in a nasty rental with 2 tiny children while my dad was working 2 jobs while this was going on. Throughout the entire process, the bank and Bob treated them very poorly, bullying my mom and lying to my dad. What should have been an exciting time for my parents was ruined. My mom cried a lot. My dad got depressed. Finally, the bank threatened my parents with foreclosure and Bob threatened to sue my parents for breach of contract because the bank refused to pay him any more money. So my exhausted parents went to an attorney and gave him the rundown. Plumbing, electrical, tiling issues, the whole sorry mess. My parents were scared. All they had was their small down payment savings, so if this became a lengthy court battle the bank and Bob would win. The attorney, Tom, was kind, but my dad said he could tell that he and Mom were doomed from Tom's facial expressions as he sorted through the paperwork. Then, abruptly, Tom smiled. "Let's get everyone together for a meeting," he told my parents. "Tomorrow." So my parents, Tom, the bank's representative, the bank's attorney, Bob, and Bob's attorney met at the bank. Tom didn't give anyone else time to begin. He said, "Well, my clients have decided that they no longer want this house. Please remove it." Everyone else started to laugh. "Remove it? Have you lost your mind?" "Tom, in a sweeping, theatrical gesture, placed a deed on the table. My clients own the land the house is sitting on outright. They no longer want the house. Get the house off my client's land. Bob's attorney stared at the deed, and then turned and stared at Bob. You built a house on land you don't own? Bob nodded. The bank's attorney started yelling at the bank's representative. You didn't finance the land the house is on? The representative stammered, no? Tom said firmly, as I said, gentlemen, you're trespassing on my client's land. I expect the house to be removed and the land returned to its original state, at once. My dad said he'll remember the blank looks everyone on the other side of the table passed to one another for his whole life. Sure, the bank could foreclose, on a house that wouldn't exist by the end of the week, with no way to recoup the money. They didn't even own the land it was on. Bob was out the 50% he'd paid out of pocket, plus he was on the hook for tearing down the house and removing it. On top of that, the bank would undoubtedly want him to repay the initial 50% they'd given him. Could they have gone after my parents? Sure. A foreclosure would have meant bad credit for my parents moving forward. They might lose their down payment. But to sign off on the house in its condition at that time would have meant thousands and thousands of dollars in cash to replace/repair everything from the roof to the basement before the house could be safely lived in. The bank knew my parents didn't have that kind of money, they're the ones who approved the mortgage. Suddenly, my parents were good people, it was all such a misunderstanding, and the bank and Bob couldn't do enough for them. The house was brought in line with the original blueprints and specifications immediately, at no extra cost to my parents, but at considerable cost to Bob. My parents signed the mortgage. Bob got the rest of his money, and just about broke even on the build. The bank's representative was fired. And Tom, attorney extraordinaire, got a stinging tale of triumph to recall to fellow attorneys for the rest of his life. I killed an entire tow company with one phone call. Several years back, I went to work for a towing company. The pay was pretty decent, but we had to share trucks, and the boss felt that he knew where we needed to sit in order to get the best calls. Several months in, I realized that I was not making the type of money that I should be making. So I took the opportunity while I was sitting in a parking lot one evening to start researching the laws pertaining to employees in similar positions. He was kind of an asshole, and the trucks had transponders so that he could see if we had them idling with the air conditioner on. He was always calling, complaining about something if the wheels were not turning. During my research, I discovered that if he required us to sit in a certain parking lot, street, or any location of his choosing, then we were entitled to be paid an hourly wage, not just our commission. The technical term was engaged to wait. However, if he allowed us to roam about while we waited for calls freely, we were not entitled to hourly wages, and we were therefore considered waiting to be engaged. I never mentioned this to him, but I did start taking note of my time. Another month or so went by, and he decided to start coming down on me for tiny little things, such as I forgot a pop can in the cup holder. He actually had a screaming fit about that. At this point, I was tired of working there and had already found another job, so I decided it was time to put my plan into motion. I called him up, and told him that we needed to have a conversation about my final wages and that we could meet at his convenience. Upon entering the office, I laid out my argument, explained the state law, and told him I expected to be paid for the hours that I was on the clock but not freely allowed to roam looking for work or able to do things of my choosing. He told me in no uncertain terms would not be paid for that time, as that was agreed to upon my employment. I did not bother to argue, as I already had my next step planned, so I took my final check, and left. The following Monday, I made a phone call to the State Labor Board, where I laid out my case to them. Needless to say, they were very interested in what was going on. In the end, they came to review his employment records and speak to the driver still working. When he got the bill of what he had to pay us all, it was too much for him to afford, so he sold the trucks, his boat, and his lot and went out of business. I never got the money owed to me in full, only a fraction. But the satisfaction of knowing the law just a little bit better than he did and watching it all burn was pure bliss. What is the worst thing a person can steal? It was a couple of years ago when I was working security at this prestigious country club. The members were all rich as F and not afraid to flaunt it. One day, this dude walks in and he's acting all sus. Something about him just didn't sit right with me, but I'm not the type to jump to conclusions, so I keep an eye on him from my post. Next thing I know, I see this dude dragging this woman by her hair. She's screaming and crying and trying to break away from him, but he's just abusing her and calling her all kinds of effed up names. Now, I'm not really the intervening type, but I've got a basic sense of human decency, so I start yelling at him to stop and trying to radio for backup. But this dude just ignores me and keeps dragging the woman across the floor towards the exit, and that's when it gets even crazier. She starts screaming that he stole her cunt. I'm not even kidding, she's going on about how he stole her effing coochie, and I'm just standing there, like, what the F is happening? Of course, this dude fiercely denies everything and insists that he hasn't stolen anything, but the woman just keeps going on and on about how he took her effing genitalia. And then, just to make it even weirder, she starts taking out her anger on me, accusing me of being in on it and helping the dude steal her coochie. Needless to say, the whole scene was an absolute shit show. It took me and my fellow security members a good hour to get things under control and escort both of them out of the country club. But even after all was said and done, that woman just kept insisting that her cunt had been stolen. It was effing nuts. Looking back on it now, I'm pretty sure it was all just some elaborate bullshit they cooked up to try and get away with something. Maybe they were trying to steal something valuable and thought that pretending to be in the grip of some wild intimate freakout would distract us? But honestly, who knows? All I can say is that it was one of the craziest and most twisted things I've ever witnessed. Which actor/actress was casted perfectly in a movie/TV show? When it comes to casting the perfect actor/actress for a movie or TV show, there's one name that stands out in my mind: Bryan Cranston. He was absolutely brilliant in Breaking Bad. I mean, I've never seen anyone embody a character like he did. He was Walter White. It's crazy to think that he wasn't even supposed to be cast in the role originally. There was this professor from the University of New Mexico who was trying to sabotage the production of the show because he thought it was giving the state a bad name. But the producers went ahead and cast Cranston anyway, and man, did he ever deliver. He was able to make you feel sympathy for Walter White, even when he was doing something absolutely sinister. It was like he was playing two completely different people at once. And let's not forget about the rest of the cast either. Aaron Paul was spot on as Jesse, and Giancarlo Esposito was terrifying as Gus. But again, it all came back to Bryan Cranston. I don't think anyone could have played that role better than he did. Breaking Bad was a masterpiece of television, and it's all thanks to Bryan Cranston. And speaking of Cranston, I heard that he's been cast in a new movie coming out this year. I'm really excited to see what he'll bring to the table this time. I'm sure it'll be just as amazing as his performance in Breaking Bad. Who knows, maybe he'll even win an Oscar for it. One thing's for sure, I'm definitely looking forward to it. I, 28 female, don't feel good about a sex club experience with my partner, 31 male. My partner and I have been together for just over 10 years. For the last couple of years, we've really been exploring different aspects of our sexuality/kink/fantasies together. We both expressed an interest in attending a sex club together and eventually opening up our relationship, sexually, not romantically. It's something we've talked about at length. About a month and a half ago, we were in the area of a sex club and decided to check it out. We didn't know what to expect and wanted to gather an idea of what we'd be getting ourselves into. We did a tour of the place, signed up for a membership, and took some time to look around and enjoy the atmosphere. We had both agreed that we wouldn't be going all in that night as we were unprepared to enter the dress-down area of the club. We had a great time. We didn't do anything wild, just had a few drinks and had a tiny bit of fun in the bar area. Looking back, this next part may have been a red flag. As I was pleasuring my partner in the bar area, he started to lightly pressure me to enter the dress-down area with him. I said no, I'm not prepared tonight. He let it be for a moment before pressing again. I expressed to him that I was not ready and that we had agreed upon entering that tonight would be minimally exciting. He eventually agreed and let it go. I was a little unnerved at his persistence after I had made my boundaries clear. I disregarded it and chalked it up to excitement as I was excited too. After our night at the club, we worked together to come up with rules and boundaries concerning our future trips. Our rules stated that we would frequently check in with each other, always ask each other permission before engaging in an activity with another person, and not split up at any point, and that would take things very slowly to start. At no point did my partner object to these rules. He heartily agreed that we'd need these parameters in place in order to have a good time and preserve our relationship. In fact, half of the rules were at his suggestion. Fast forward to last weekend. We had been discussing and reaffirming each other's rules and boundaries for the past month and a half. We arrive at the club and it's way busier than the last time we attended. It's very overwhelming and overstimulating. I notice an open glory hole and suggest to my partner that he fill the hole for lack of a better term. He took a moment to consider whether he was ready and then decided he was. He got a taste of pleasure and I believe that was the point at which the night started to go awry. As soon as he had experienced something good, all he wanted was more. We ran into a couple that we had met earlier in the night and started to get cozy with them on a couch. My partner and I were beside each other. The other couple was on either side of us, me with the man and him with the woman. As I was speaking to the man, I looked at my partner and saw that he was making out with this woman. I was a little taken aback, but not upset at this point. The man I was with noticed this also and asked if I'd like to try that with him. I obliged. At this point, the female my partner was with checked in on me to make sure I was feeling okay with everything that was transpiring. Hindsight, I hate that a stranger had the decency to check on my well-being, but my partner did not. I said I was okay for the current moment. As some time passed, I felt my partner move away from me and noticed that he was laying this woman down and asking her for access to her breasts. He still hadn't spoken to me since sitting down next to this woman. I was a little shocked but didn't want to seem uncool, stupid, I know. So I too took it a little bit farther with the man I was with, after asking permission from my partner. After a moment, I heard the woman saying no no no. And looked over to see my partner get up and walk away. Now breaking the no splitting up rule. I was shocked and confused. The woman came to me to say that everything was okay. She just had a very sensitive clit and my partner accidentally hit the wrong spot, again, without my prior knowledge of how far he was going sexually. She said he had gone to the bathroom. At this point, I realized we needed to regroup and I needed some air. I explained to the couple that my partner and I were going to go outside when he came back. Upon his return, I asked him to join me outside, and he said he would join me after performing oral on this woman. I was hurt and completely blindsided by his refusal. I said okay and went to the bathroom by myself this time as it was clear all the rules had been thrown out the window. I took a moment to collect myself and returned to my partner. It was at this point that I put my foot down and said that I was ready for us to leave the club. After a moment's hesitation, he obliged and left with me. He couldn't understand why I was so upset. I explained to him that he had completely disregarded both me and our set of rules. Initially, he apologized, but upon returning to our hotel he became irate with me. He started yelling at me because I had also been partaking in an activity with another man, even though I had asked his permission before doing so and he had not. He said he was justified in doing what he did because I was also doing stuff, but he was the initiator in all of his activity and did so without ever asking permission/checking in on me as per our rules. He has since apologized more sincerely and is behaving as if he now understands what he did was wrong, but I just have no idea what to think at this point. I know that I feel incredibly hurt and betrayed, akin to having been cheated on. I feel that I wouldn't have gone as far as I did with the new man if I hadn't felt abandoned and confused. I feel stupid for not confronting my partner about not following our rules as it was happening. I feel mad that I feel stupid because I shouldn't have been put in that situation in the first place. What is the best way to move forward from this situation? I got fired and unfired on the same day. Boom. There I was, working in the corporate headquarters of a very large telco, responsible for the email system for HQ, about 1,100 users at the time. Like all the sysadmins at HQ, I was a contractor, working through a body shop outsourcer. My boss was a guy I'll call S. S was the site manager for the outsourcer, and was the direct manager of all the contractor sysadmins. The customer contact was a guy I'll call J. J was what they called an IT planner, basically a systems architect. He had dotted line responsibility over all the sysadmins, including me. I also had a backup there, who I'll call B. B was a competent sysadmin, capable of handling most day-to-day stuff. We normally kept staff in the office from 8 to 6 on workdays, with an on-call rotation for certain specialty areas, including email. Back then, we carried a pager, yes, an old-school beeper, for on-call duty. My on-call rotation was 1 week on, 1 week off. This story happened in my off week, when B carried the pager. One Saturday night, at around 3:30 a.m., my home phone rang. My wife answered, and it was Jay calling. She grumpily handed the phone to me. Now my wife and I had just gotten home, having been out for much of the night with our neighbors. I was, for lack of a more refined term, positively hammered at this point. Jay informed me that there was an email outage, and that I needed to remote in and get it back up immediately, and then drive to the office to start a root cause analysis. I informed him that I was in no condition to drive, let alone touch a production rig, and asked what B told him when he called the on-call pager. Jay told me that he didn't call the on-call pager because this was way too serious of a problem to trust the backup sysadmin. He wanted me working on this, and that if I can't be relied upon to do my job when I was needed, he'd find someone else who could, and hung up the phone. I went back to sleep. The next morning I had an email from B, telling me that Jay had called him at home, rather than paging the on-call rotation. It was a very simple issue. Our backup software went screwy and started writing out hundreds of GB of temp files, which filled up a critical volume on our production email server. Temp files deleted, email services restarted, problem kicked over to our backup software SME to figure out what happened. Total downtime after B got the call was about 15 minutes. The next day, I arrived at the office to a note from S, my manager, asking me to come see him ASAP. I went to S' office, and sitting there was Jay, who was in the process of demanding that I be fired immediately for being drunk at work. From there, the conversation went something like this: S, but Blimplorf wasn't at work. He was at home, and wasn't in the on-call rotation this weekend. Jay, I don't want to hear it about the on-call rotation. Blimplorf needs to be ready to work when I tell him to. I can't rely on an alcoholic, and I want him gone. S, if he's not on call, he's free to do whatever he wants with his time. J, not as long as he works for me. J then demands that I hand my office badge to him, and calls security from S' phone to have me escorted out of the building. I'm in absolute disbelief at this point. S gets up and goes off to points unknown, just as security arrives to see me out to the parking lot. As I'm driving off, I see Jay's boss, I'll call her M. M is running across the street to the parking lot. Strange, but I was more focused on how the hell I was going to explain this to my wife when I got home. I got home, and my wife was sitting on the couch, just absolutely livid. Now this was really weird, because I hadn't told her what happened yet. Those motherfuckers fired you? I'm confused as hell at this point. My wife told me that M called her, and that I need to call her back as soon as possible. Come to find out, when S had went off, he was going to M's office to explain the situation and keep him from shit-canning me. M heard from S, and freaked the hell out. When I saw her running across the street, she was trying to catch me in the parking lot before I left to tell me to come back in. When M couldn't find my car, she went back into the office and called the house, intending to leave me a voicemail, but got my wife instead. M told my wife what had happened, promised to rein Jay in, and asked her to tell me to come back into the office to sort it out. So I let them stew for a while. M called about 20 minutes after I got home. We let her go to the machine. S called as well, just as my wife and I went out to get some lunch. Over lunch, my wife and I talked about how we would handle this, and, largely for financial reasons, we decided to talk to them to see if we could work this out. We got back home to 3 more voicemails from M and S. About 30 seconds after we walked in the door, the phone rang again. This time it was Jay, obviously on speakerphone. Jay apologized to me, and asked me to come back to work the next day. I agreed, but as he hung up, I could hear M say to him, "Jay, you're an effing idiot." I worked there for another year after that, before another Jay fuck-up made me leave once and for all. That was a whole nother story.
What is the weirdest thing your girlfriend does? She eats frozen pizza rolls and chicken nuggets. Doesn't bother sticking them in the microwave or oven, just eats them frozen. When she's sad or having a bad day, she will ask me to bounce her. This involves hugging her and lifting her up and down somewhat quickly. It always makes her smile and she makes the cutest noises. Sometimes Ellie'll stop too early and she will politely ask for more. She's 30 years old and I will always be there to bounce her when she needs it most. My wife sticks her finger in my mouth when I yawn. Every damn time. She'll chase me around the house in a gremlin pose while yelling, "Gimme that booty." She'll tap me on the shoulder when we are laying in bed and say can I come in when she wants to put her head on my chest and cuddle. No matter how many times I tell her she does not need to ask permission to cuddle with me. My wife likes me to swing her legs in circles when she is lying down. It causes her to laugh uncontrollably. Before she exits her car, the radio volume must be at.
I confronted my stepdaughter on her questionable adult material choices and she admitted she had a crush on me. I need advice on how to deal with this worrying situation for the past week. A week ago I needed to take some pictures and so I borrowed my 19-year-old daughter's iPad nearby without her permission. While I was there I was a little curious about what she does with it, so I happened to see her search history. I came across a lot of adult material regarding dad-daughter or stepdad stuff. Maybe I am reading too much into it as a guy, but now I am doubting myself and my parenting skills as a father. I feel like we have a pretty good relationship as we always do something fun together every week, like window shopping or going to the movies together. My wife just says that my daughter wants to spend more time with me and being affectionate is just a phase. Although it does seem that she is more affectionate and touchy with me than with my wife. I can't help but now feel awkward, and maybe I am reading too much into this, but it seemed like the guys in the adult material also look strangely similar to me in ethnicity and appearance. I have been feeling very uncomfortable around her and making excuses to avoid spending time together this week. I know I can't act like this, so I need help figuring out how to navigate this situation, or if I am just worrying for no good reason. A few weeks ago I noticed some questionable adult content my daughter had been watching about older men having intimacy with their daughters. I was worried about this behavior, so I confronted her with it. I realized that this might make things awkward, but I felt like we had a pretty close relationship, so it would be easy to talk about what's going on. She was really embarrassed, but I told her it is okay as long as there was no underlying trauma or reason. She then admitted having a crush on me and asked me not to tell her mother. I feel even more worried now since I don't want anyone to get hurt in this process and I want to keep our family the way it has been so far. I told her I would need some space to think about all these things, and I have spent the past few days avoiding everyone and being stressed out about what happens now. I am confused about what I should do so that nobody is hurt. My parents threw me out as a child, and then expected everything from me when my grandparents died. My mother and father had me when I was 16 and used to lay hands on me all throughout my childhood. My father used to yell at 5-year-old me and blame me for ruining his dreams and aspirations in life. I was already unloved, but when I was 6 my younger sister was born, and I was left completely uncared for and unwanted. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. And as my sister got older, it went from me sharing a bedroom with her, to me kicked out of the room entirely. I slept on the couch for 2 years, then the couch was put into the basement, meaning I could sleep either in the basement or on the floor. When I was 10, my parents decided they were going to move away. But this move did not include me. I ended up actually being fine with this, as my grandparents had agreed to take me in. My life was instantly better. I got my own room again, and my grandparents gifted me a brand new N64 in 1996. I was finally happy. As time went on, I grew up and eventually moved out. But later moved back in to help my grandparents' house as they were getting old and living off their retirement savings. So some rent money for me went a long way in paying the bills. Then my grandma died. She was mugged by a robber, who took her life. My grandpa was heartbroken. He also passed about a year and a half later. He took his life. Pretty much everything they owned was willed to me. Their savings, their house, their vehicles, their stuff, everything. The house was long paid off, and Grandpa knew how to keep up with its maintenance. In fact, after Grandma died he kind of doubled down on renovating the place. He had the roof redone, the house was repainted by us inside and out, and we fixed a lot of little things. Grandpa's neighbor George even came by to help redo the plumbing. One morning I was fixing breakfast and my grandpa never came downstairs. You couldn't keep the man from his bacon. So I went to check on him. I found him there, suspended via a rope. My parents made Grandpa's funeral a crap show. They didn't bother to show up for Grandma's. They were too busy. And at Grandpa's funeral they didn't seem to grieve at all. My sister also showed up wearing a brightly colored designer dress. Which I wasn't happy about as it was a church clothes-only function. I noticed my parents repeatedly whispering to each other and glaring at me whenever I looked at them. Come to find out at the will reading that my parents knew that they'd been disinherited long ago for their treatment of me. And they thought it extremely unfair I got everything. They threatened to sue me to contest the will. And I got repeated calls and messages from my father, mother and sister telling me I needed to do the right thing and give my father what was supposed to be his. I told them all to flake off in far more unsavory words. My parents ended up taking me to court to challenge the will. But the judge ruled in my favor after seeing the will and hearing us both out. So it wasn't a long drawn-out legal battle. The judge even looked at my parents with absolute disgust after seeing the will and hearing about their mistreatment of me in my childhood. He called my father a terrible parent, and that my grandparents were right to disown him. My father just hung his head in silence, but he made sure to stop me outside the courtroom and tell me I was always the biggest mistake of his life. And that if he could go back in time, he'd make sure I never existed. He should have been a football star. And instead he has to wear a name tag for a 9 to 5. I told him that mistake or not, Grandma and Grandpa could see what kind of nasty person he was. I didn't ask to be born. And the only real love I ever got was from my grandparents. And he was no father of mine anymore. I got a few more threatening and harassing phone calls, as well as some letters from my parents. All demanding money among other things. But over time they just stopped because I completely stonewalled them. The last call I ever got from them was telling me that my sister needed a kidney transplant and if I could help them out. I actually agreed and told them to meet me at a hospital that was a 2-hour drive from them. They rode out, and I never showed up. I blocked their number as soon as I got the first call that they're there.